The dusty ground shook as boots hit wood. Clara Hayes stood trembling on the general store porch, 8 months pregnant, while her father's hand gripped her arm like a vice. "Take her!" He spat at the mountain of a man before them. "She's your problem now." The town square fell silent. Women whispered behind gloved hands. Men looked away. Clara's father shoved coins into the stranger's calloused palm, payment for disposal, not marriage. The tall cowboy named Cole Braddock didn't flinch. His gray eyes met Clara's terrified ones, and something unreadable passed between them. Her life had just been sold for $30. Before we begin, if you're enjoying this story, I invite you to stay until the very end, and please hit that like button and leave a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see just how far Clara's journey reaches across the world. The sun beat down on Red Hollow Ridge like it had a personal grudge against every living thing beneath it. Clara Hayes had stopped sweating an hour ago, which she knew wasn't good. Her cotton dress clung to her swollen belly, the fabric darkened with dust, and the evidence of a body pushed too far. She swayed slightly on the porch of Mackenzie's general store, her father's fingers digging into her upper arm, hard enough to leave marks she'd carry for days. "You listening to me, girl?" Harold Hayes' voice cut through the afternoon heat. Spit flew from his mouth as he spoke, landing on her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. "Yes, Papa." "Don't you Papa me. Lost that right when you spread your legs for that no-good drifter." His face had gone purple, the color it always turned before his fist followed his words. But he wouldn't hit her here, not in front of the whole town. Harold Hayes cared too much about appearances for that. Clara kept her eyes down, focused on the warped planks beneath her feet. Someone had spilled something sticky near the door, molasses maybe, and flies swarmed it in a black, writhing mass. She watched them and tried not to think about what was coming. Tried not to think at all. The murmur of voices surrounded them. Red Hollow Ridge wasn't much, maybe 200 souls if you counted the ranches scattered across the territory, but every one of them seemed to be here today. Word had spread fast. Harold Hayes was getting rid of his daughter, getting rid of the shame she'd brought to his doorstep. "That him?" Harold jerked his chin toward the end of the street. Clara looked up despite herself. A man was riding in on a horse so black it seemed to absorb the sunlight. Even from a distance, she could tell he was enormous. Not fat, solid, built like the granite formations that jutted from the desert floor. He sat easy in the saddle, moving with the kind of natural grace that big men sometimes had when they'd spent their whole lives working. "That's Braddock," someone said behind them. A woman's voice, tight with something Clara couldn't identify. Fear? Excitement? "Lord have mercy." "Ain't no Lord gonna help her now," another voice answered, followed by a skitter of laughter that died quick. The rider drew closer. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs, and the baby kicked hard as if sensing her panic. She pressed a hand to her belly, whispering words that had no sound. "Stay calm. Stay calm. We'll be all right." But she didn't believe it. Cole Braddock dismounted in front of the general store with a creak of leather and the soft thud of boots and dirt. Up close, he was even bigger than she'd thought. 6.5 feet if he was an inch, with shoulders that blocked out the sun. His face was weathered, carved with lines that spoke of hard living and harder years. A scar ran from his left eyebrow to his cheekbone, white against sun-darkened skin. His hat shadowed his eyes, but she felt them on her anyway. Studying, measuring. "Hayes?" His voice was deep, rough as creek gravel. "Braddock." Her father's grip loosened slightly. "You got the money?" "Showed you the money last week. You said that was enough for discussion." "Discussion's over. You want her or not?" Clara's stomach turned. Want her. Like she was a horse being sold at auction, like she was property to be bartered and traded. She supposed she was, in the eyes of the law, an unmarried woman with no prospects and a belly full of bastard baby. Her father had every right to dispose of her however he saw fit. Cole Braddock's eyes shifted to her face. She forced herself to meet them. They were gray, she saw now. The color of storm clouds before the rain came. They swept over her, her face, her swollen middle, her bare feet covered in dust. She'd lost her shoes somewhere on the walk into town, but her father hadn't let her go back for them. "How far along?" Braddock asked. "What's it matter?" Harold snapped. "Matters because I'm asking." There was steel in those words, quiet but unmistakable. Harold heard it too. His hand tightened on Clara's arm again, a reflex, but he answered, 8 months, maybe more. The whore won't say. Clara flinched at the word. It wasn't the first time she'd heard it. She'd heard it plenty over the past months, but it still landed like a slap. I'm not talking to you. Braddock's gaze hadn't left Clara's face. I'm talking to her. How far along? She opened her mouth, closed it. Her throat had gone dry as the dirt road. When she finally spoke, her voice came out cracked and small. 8 months and 2 weeks. Near as I can figure. He nodded. Baby moving regular. Yes, sir. Don't call me sir, you hurt anywhere, bleeding, fever? The questions caught her off guard. She'd expected disgust, maybe. Anger. The cold dismissal she'd gotten from everyone else in this town. Not concern, not these careful clinical questions that suggested he actually cared about the answer. I'm tired, she said finally. Real tired, but no fever, no bleeding. When's the last time you ate? Harold made an impatient noise. What is this, a medical examination? You want her or not, Braddock? I got other offers. That was a lie. Clara knew it, and she suspected Braddock knew it too. Nobody wanted a pregnant woman with no husband and no family willing to claim her. Her father had spent weeks trying to find someone, anyone, who would take her off his hands. Most men wouldn't touch her with a 10-foot pole. The few who'd shown interest had wanted things that made her father's deal with Braddock look merciful by comparison. Braddock reached into his vest and pulled out a leather pouch. It made a heavy sound when he tossed it to Harold. Coins clinked inside. $30, Braddock said, like we agreed. Harold caught the pouch, weighed it in his hand, then tucked it away without counting. She's yours then, and good riddance. He let go of Clara's arm so suddenly she stumbled. Braddock moved fast for a big man, catching her elbow before she could fall. His hand was warm through the thin fabric of her sleeve. Steady. Got your things? He asked her. Clara almost laughed. Things. As if she had anything to gather. No, sir. No. This is all I got. The dress on her back. The life growing inside her. The shame that clung to her skin like a second dress. Braddock's jaw tightened slightly. He turned to Harold. Her clothes? Personal items? Burn them, Harold said flatly. Wasn't having that filth in my house. Something changed in Braddock's face. It was subtle. Just a slight narrowing of his eyes, a tension in his shoulders. But Clara felt the air shift, felt the danger that rolled off him like heat off sun-baked stone. You burned your daughter's belongings. It wasn't a question. She ain't my daughter anymore. Harold's voice had gone defensive. Made that clear when she... when she what? Braddock took a step forward. Just one. But it was enough to make Harold shut his mouth and take a step back. When she made a mistake? When she trusted the wrong man? That's enough to erase 18 years? She knew what she was doing. She's a girl, barely grown. Old enough to lie down. Finish that sentence. Braddock's voice had gone soft, deadly soft. Please, finish it. Harold Hayes was not a small man, and he was not known for backing down. But he backed down now. Clara watched her father's face cycle through emotions, anger, pride, calculation, before settling on cold practicality. She's your problem now, he repeated. You want to defend her honor? You go right ahead. But don't come crying to me when you realize what kind of woman you bought yourself. He turned on his heel and walked away. Didn't look back. Didn't say goodbye. Just walked into Mackenzie's general store like he'd come to town for nothing more important than buying flour and nails. Clara watched him go. She waited for something to break inside her, some last piece of love or hope or daughterly devotion. But there was nothing. Just a hollow space where those feelings used to be. Can you ride? Braddock's voice pulled her back. She looked up at him. He was watching her with those storm cloud eyes, his expression unreadable. I used to. Been a while. Horse can carry double if you can't, but it's 3 hours to my place, easier if you ride. 3 hours. Clara's legs were already shaking from the walk into town. The thought of sitting a horse for 3 hours made her want to cry, but she nodded anyway. I can manage. He studied her for a moment longer, then gave a short nod and turned toward his horse. The crowd that had gathered began to disperse, their entertainment over, but the whispers continued. Clara heard fragments as people passed. Bought himself a whore. Baby probably ain't even born yet and already cursed. What kind of man would... Desperate, that's what. She forced herself not to listen. Forced her spine straight and her chin up. They'd been saying worse for months now. Their words couldn't hurt her anymore. Except they could. They did. Braddock brought the black horse around. This is Midnight. He's got a gentle gait, won't jostle you much. He patted the horse's neck, and the animal made a soft sound in response. You need help mounting? I can do it. Pride. Stupid pride. But it was all she had left. She reached for the stirrup, and immediately her vision swam. Black spots danced at the edges of her sight. Her knees buckled. Braddock caught her before she hit the ground. One moment she was falling, the next she was being lifted like she weighed nothing. He set her on Midnight's back with surprising gentleness, steadying her with one hand while he adjusted the stirrups with the other. When's the last time you ate? He asked again. Clara's face burned. Yesterday morning. Maybe. I don't remember. His hand stilled on the stirrup. Then he turned and walked back into the general store. Clara sat on the horse, swaying slightly, trying to keep the world from spinning. Around her, the remaining townspeople watched, judging, always judging. Braddock emerged a few minutes later carrying a wrapped bundle. He swung up behind her in one smooth motion, settling into the saddle and reaching around her to take the reins. The bundle he pressed into her hands. Eat, he said. She unwrapped it with shaking fingers. Bread, cheese, dried meat. Her stomach cramped at the sight of it, hunger and nausea warring inside her. She took a small bite of bread and immediately wanted to devour the whole thing, forced herself to go slow. Braddock made a clicking sound and Midnight started forward at an easy walk. They left Red Hollow Ridge behind, the buildings growing smaller in the distance. Nobody waved goodbye. Nobody called out a blessing or a good wish. Clara ate and tried not to cry. They rode in silence for the better part of an hour. The landscape around them was brutal in its emptiness. Red dirt stretching to the horizon, broken only by scrub brush and the occasional twisted tree. Heat shimmered off the ground in waves. Above them, the sky was a blue so bright it hurt to look at. Clara finished the food and felt marginally more human. The baby had settled, no longer kicking frantically against her ribs. She was intensely aware of the man behind her, his solid presence, the warmth of him seeping through her dress, the steady rhythm of his breathing. He hadn't spoken since they left town, hadn't asked her any questions, hadn't demanded anything. It made her nervous. Why'd you do it? The words came out before she could stop them. Do what? Buy me, take me, whatever this is. A pause. Then, needed help around the place. Clara almost laughed. I'm 8 months pregnant. What kind of help you think I'm going to be? The baby won't be pregnant. She twisted in the saddle to look at him. His face was impassive, eyes fixed on the horizon ahead. You bought me for my baby? Bought you because your father was going to sell you to someone worse. Took the best bid he got, and the best bid was mine. That doesn't answer my question. Don't recall you asking a question. You made a statement. Clara turned back around, frustration bubbling in her chest. Why does a man like you need a woman like me? What kind of woman are you? Ruined, used up, shameful. She spat the words like they were poison. That's what everyone says. Everyone's a fool. The simple certainty in his voice stunned her. She waited for him to elaborate, but he didn't. Just kept Midnight moving at that same steady pace, his body a wall of warmth at her back. You got a name you prefer? He asked after a while. Or you want to be called Clara? Clara's fine. It's my name. Clara it is then. More silence. The sun began its slow descent toward the western horizon, and the heat started to ease. Clara's back ached from sitting upright, and her hips throbbed from the spread of her legs around the horse's barrel. She shifted, trying to find a more comfortable position. We'll stop in a bit, Braddock said, as if reading her discomfort. There's a creek about a mile up. You can rest there. True to his word, he guided Midnight off the main path and down a rocky slope to where a thin stream cut through the landscape. It wasn't much, barely more than a trickle, but in this country, any water was a gift. He dismounted first, then reached up to help her down. Clara hesitated. Accepting his help felt like accepting this new reality, that she belonged to him now, that her old life was truly over. But her body made the decision for her. She leaned into his arms, and he lifted her down like she was made of something fragile. Her legs nearly gave out when her feet hit the ground. Braddock steadied her, his hands on her waist, until she found her balance. "Take your time," he said. "We're not in a rush." He moved away to tend to midnight, loosening the saddle and letting the horse drink from the creek. Clara lowered herself onto a flat rock near the water's edge and pulled off her ruined stockings. Her feet were a mess, blistered, cut, swollen. She dangled them in the cool water and nearly wept from the relief of it. Braddock filled a canteen and brought it to her. "Drink slow. Too fast and you'll get sick." She drank, forcing herself to sip when she wanted to gulp. The water was sweet and cold, the best thing she'd tasted in days. When she was done, she handed the canteen back and found him watching her again with that unreadable expression. "What?" she asked, defensive. "You're tougher than you look." "That's supposed to be a compliment?" "It's an observation." Clara looked away. "I don't feel tough." "Didn't say you felt it, said you are it." He settled onto a rock near hers, still keeping a respectful distance. "Takes a lot to survive what you've been through. Most women would have broken by now." "Maybe I am broken. You don't know." "Maybe. But broken things can still be useful, and they can be fixed." She wanted to argue with him, but she was too tired, too worn down. Instead, she asked, "What happens when we get to your place?" "You'll have a room, door locks from the inside. You can use it or not, your choice. Kitchen's got supplies. You're welcome to cook if you want, but I can manage my own meals if you're not up to it. There's a well out back, and I've got a tub you can use for bathing." "And then what?" "Then you rest, eat, get your strength back before the baby comes." "And after the baby comes?" Braddock was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful. "After the baby comes, we'll figure things out, but you don't have to worry about me making demands. That's not why I brought you to my place." "Then why did you?" He looked at her directly, and for the first time she saw something vulnerable in those gray eyes, something almost sad. "Because nobody deserves to be thrown away like trash, no matter what they did or didn't do." Clara's throat tightened. She wanted to believe him, wanted desperately to trust that this strange, quiet man meant what he said. But trust was a luxury she couldn't afford anymore. "I don't believe you," she whispered. "I know," he said, "but you will." They reached Braddock's place as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple. Clara had expected something rough, maybe a shack or a dugout carved into the hillside. What she got was a cabin that looked like it had been built with care and attention. Solid log walls chinked tight against the wind, a real door with iron hinges, windows with actual glass, a porch that wrapped around two sides. "You built this yourself?" she asked as Braddock helped her down from midnight. "Most of it. Had help with the roof." He nodded toward the structure. "It's not fancy, but it keeps the weather out." Not fancy was an understatement, but compared to what she'd imagined, it was practically a palace. Clara followed him inside, her heart hammering with a new kind of nervousness. The interior was sparse but clean, a main room with a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table, and two chairs. Shelves lined one wall, holding supplies and a few books. A narrow hallway led to what she assumed were the bedrooms. "This way." Braddock led her down the hall and opened a door. The room beyond was small but adequate. A bed with a quilt, a washstand, a trunk at the foot of the bed, and most importantly, a door that locked from the inside, just like he'd said. Clara stood in the doorway, taking it in. "This is for me?" "This is for you." He stepped back, giving her space. "I'm across the hall if you need anything. Otherwise, I'll leave you be." He started to turn away, but Clara's voice stopped him. "Mr. Braddock?" "Cole?" "Just Cole." Cole. The name felt strange on her tongue, too familiar, too intimate. "Why are you being kind to me?" He considered the question, his face half-shadowed in the dimming light. "My mother died when I was 12. Fever took her quick. Before she went, she made me promise something, said, 'Cole, you're going to grow up big and strong, and people are going to fear you because of it, but don't you ever use that strength to hurt somebody weaker. You use it to protect them instead.' So that's what I do." Clara's eyes stung. "I'm sorry about your mother." "Me too." He cleared his throat. "There's a nightgown in the trunk. Probably too big, but it's clean. I'll have water heating if you want a bath before bed." "Thank you." He nodded and left, pulling the door closed behind him. Clara stood alone in the small room, listening to his footsteps fade down the hall. Then she crossed to the door and turned the lock. The click of it sliding home was the sweetest sound she'd heard in months. She sank onto the bed and finally let herself cry. Best sit. The bath was heaven. Clara had forgotten what it felt like to be clean, truly clean. She scrubbed away layers of dirt and shame, washing her hair 3 times until it squeaked under her fingers. The water turned gray, then brown, then nearly black. She didn't care. She kept scrubbing until her skin was pink and her fingers were pruned. The nightgown Cole had mentioned was indeed too big, but it was soft and smelled like cedar. She pulled it on and felt almost human again, almost like a person instead of a problem. She found Cole in the kitchen when she emerged, her hair still damp and hanging loose down her back. He was stirring something on the stove that smelled rich and savory. Her stomach growled loudly in response. "Stew," he said without turning around. "Should be ready in a few minutes. You like stew? I like anything that's food." He glanced at her then, and something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe. Or something else she couldn't name. "You should sit. You've been on your feet too long." Clara lowered herself into one of the chairs at the table, grateful. Her body ached in places she didn't know could ache. The baby was moving again, doing slow rolls that made her belly shift visibly beneath the nightgown. Cole ladled stew into 2 bowls and set one in front of her. Then he sat across from her with his own bowl, and for a few minutes they ate in silence. The stew was good, simple but flavorful, with chunks of beef and vegetables that had been cooked until they were soft. "You cook this?" Clara asked. "I cook all my meals. Living alone, you learn or you starve." "How long have you been alone?" "Long time." He didn't elaborate and Clara didn't push. They finished eating. Cole collected the bowls and washed them in a basin while Clara sat at the table, fighting to keep her eyes open. The warmth of the food, the safety of the cabin, the sheer exhaustion of the day, it was all catching up with her. "You should sleep," Cole said, drying his hands on a towel. "Tomorrow you can rest properly. But tonight, just sleep." Clara nodded and pushed herself to her feet. She made it halfway to the hallway before the words came tumbling out. "I don't know what you want from me." Cole turned to face her. "I don't want anything from you." "Everybody wants something." "Maybe, but I'm not everybody." "Then what am I doing here, really?" He was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. When he spoke, his voice was gentle. "You're here because you needed somewhere to be, and I had somewhere to offer, that's all. Nobody does something for nothing." "Maybe I'm nobody then." Clara searched his face for deception, for hidden motives, for the cruelty she'd been trained to expect. But all she saw was a tired man with kind eyes and a scar on his face, a man who'd bought her freedom for $30 and asked nothing in return. "I'm going to bed," she said finally. "Good. Lock your door." She did, and for the first time in 8 months, Clara Hayes slept without fear. Morning came too bright and too early. Clara woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the sound of an axe biting into wood. She lay still for a moment, disoriented, before the events of yesterday came crashing back. She was at Cole Braddock's cabin. Her father had sold her. Her old life was over. The baby kicked, as if reminding her that some things remained constant. Clara pressed a hand to her belly and whispered, "I know, little one, we're going to be all right." She didn't know if she believed it, but saying it made her feel better. She dressed in the same dirty clothes from yesterday, there was nothing else, and emerged from her room to find Cole wasn't in the cabin. Through the window, she could see him in the yard, splitting logs with methodical precision. His shirt was already dark with sweat despite the early hour. Clara's stomach rumbled. She found bread and butter in the kitchen, along with eggs and a few strips of bacon. Her fingers itched to cook, to be useful, to prove she could earn her keep. But Cole had said she didn't have to. She made breakfast anyway. By the time Cole came in, she'd fried the bacon until it was crispy and scrambled the eggs with a bit of butter. Not fancy, but decent. He stopped in the doorway, looking at the plates she'd set on the table. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I wanted to." "Why?" "Because you're feeding me, housing me. Least I can do is help with the cooking." Cole studied her for a moment, then nodded and sat down. They ate in comfortable silence, and Clara felt something ease in her chest. This wasn't so bad. Maybe she could manage this. I need to ride out to check the fence line on the north pasture, Cole said when they'd finished. Be gone most of the day. You all right here alone? Panic fluttered in Clara's chest. Alone. She'd be alone in this strange place, miles from anyone, but she forced it down and nodded. I'll be fine. There's a rifle over the mantel. You know how to shoot? A little. My papa taught me. She hesitated. Before, Cole repeated softly. He stood and retrieved the rifle, checking that it was loaded before handing it to her. You see anyone coming up the road, anyone at all, you get inside and lock the doors. Don't open them unless I tell you it's me. You expecting trouble? Always expecting trouble. Keeps you alive. He left a few minutes later, riding out on midnight with a nod that might have been reassuring if Clara weren't so terrified. She watched him until he disappeared over the rise, then went back inside and locked the door. The cabin felt huge and empty without him in it. Clara wandered from room to room, trying to get her bearings. Cole's room was as sparse as hers. A bed, a trunk, a few personal items. Nothing revealing, nothing that told her who he really was. She ended up in the kitchen, washing the breakfast dishes and putting them away. Then she swept the floors, straightened the already straight shelves, and ran out of things to do. The rifle sat on the table where she'd left it, a dark reminder that safety was never guaranteed. Hours crawled by. Clara tried to rest, but her mind wouldn't settle. Every sound made her jump, the wind rattling the shutters, a bird landing on the roof, the distant cry of a coyote. She kept returning to the window, checking the road for riders who never came. By the time Cole returned in the late afternoon, Clara was wound tight as a spring. She heard Midnight's hoofbeats and grabbed the rifle, her heart pounding. Then Cole's voice called out, "It's me, Clara, just me." She set the rifle down with shaking hands and unlocked the door. Cole stood on the porch, dusty and tired, but something in his expression softened when he saw her face. "You all right?" he asked. "I'm fine." "You're not. You're scared." Clara wanted to deny it, but what was the point? "I'm not used to being alone anymore. The last few months there was always someone watching, someone whispering. It was awful, but at least I knew what to expect. This, I don't know what to expect." Cole stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "You expect to be safe, that's all. Nobody's going to hurt you here." "You can't promise that." "No," he agreed. "I can't, but I can promise I'll do everything in my power to make it true." Clara looked at this strange man who'd bought her like livestock and treated her like a person. She didn't understand him, didn't trust him, not fully, but she was starting to believe he meant what he said. "Thank you," she whispered. Cole nodded. "I'm going to wash up, then we'll have supper. You like venison?" "I like anything that's food," she said, echoing her words from last night. The corner of his mouth twitched. It might have been a smile. "Good, because I've got a whole lot of venison." But them. Days fell into a rhythm. Cole rose with the sun and worked until dark, mending fences, tending his small herd of cattle, chopping wood for the winter that was still months away. Clara cooked and cleaned, learning the geography of the cabin and the land around it. She grew stronger, her color returning, the hollow look leaving her eyes. But she could feel the baby dropping lower, settling into position. It wouldn't be long now. A week after her arrival, Cole came back from town with a bundle wrapped in brown paper. He set it on the table in front of her without ceremony. "What's this?" Clara asked. "Open it." She unwrapped the paper carefully. Inside were dresses, 3 of them, simple but new. There were also stockings, a pair of sturdy boots, and a warm shawl. Clara stared at them, her vision blurring. "You bought these for me?" "You needed clothes." "But these are new. They must have cost—" "Don't worry about the cost." "Cole, I can't." "You can. You will." He turned away, busying himself with hanging up his coat. "I won't have you walking around in rags." Clara pressed a hand to her mouth, fighting tears. Nobody had bought her anything in months. Her father had made it clear she deserved nothing, earned nothing, was owed nothing. And here was this man, this stranger, giving her clothes and asking for nothing in return. "Thank you," she managed. "You already thanked me. Don't need to keep doing it." But she did. She thanked him every day in small ways, by cooking meals that were better than his usual fare, by keeping the cabin clean and organized, by trying to smile when he came home even though she was scared and tired and so swollen she could barely move. The town didn't forget about them. 2 weeks in, a wagon rolled up the road carrying Martha Hennessy and Beatrice Talbot, two of Red Hollow Ridge's most upstanding citizens. Clara saw them coming and felt her stomach drop. "Cole," she called, "someone's here." He emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on his pants. His expression darkened when he saw who it was. "Stay inside," he told Clara. "I'll handle this." But Clara had spent too long hiding. She stepped onto the porch, one hand braced against the doorframe for support. The two women climbed down from the wagon with baskets over their arms. They wore tight smiles and judgmental eyes. "Mr. Braddock?" Martha said, her voice dripping false sweetness. "We thought we'd come by and welcome your guest properly." "She's not a guest," Cole said flatly. "She lives here." "Yes, well," Beatrice's smile didn't waver. "We brought some things, food, a few blankets, thought it might help with the baby coming and all." Clara wanted to refuse, wanted to throw their charity back in their faces, but the truth was she could use blankets, could use any help she could get. So she swallowed her pride and said, "That's kind of you." "May we come in?" Martha asked, already moving toward the porch. "No," Cole said. Both women stopped, shocked. "Excuse me? You can leave the baskets. We appreciate them, but you're not coming inside." "Mr. Braddock, we only want to—" "I know what you want." Cole's voice was hard. "You want to look around, want to see how the fallen woman is living, want something to gossip about at church on Sunday. Well, you're not getting it. Leave the baskets and go." Martha's face flushed red. "We are trying to be charitable." "Then be charitable from a distance." Beatrice set her basket on the porch with enough force to rattle its contents. "Come on, Martha. We're clearly not wanted here." They climbed back into the wagon, backs rigid with offense. As they turned the horses around, Martha called back, "You'll regret this, Braddock. The whole town is talking about you and that woman." "Let them talk," Cole said. He didn't watch them go, just turned to Clara. "You all right?" She nodded, though she was shaking. "They hate me." "They don't know you. They know enough." Cole picked up the baskets and carried them inside. Clara followed, sinking into a chair at the table. He started unpacking bread, preserves, dried apples, 2 thick wool blankets. Good supplies. Useful supplies. "Why do you defend me?" Clara asked. "Why do you care what they think?" Cole paused, a jar of preserves in his hand. "Because someone should. Because you deserve better than their judgment." "You don't know what I did. What if I deserve everything I got? Do you believe that?" Clara wanted to say yes, wanted to accept the blame and the shame that everyone kept trying to heap on her, but when she searched her heart, what she found was anger. "No, I don't believe that. I loved him. I thought he loved me. I thought—" She stopped, her throat closing. "He left you," Cole said quietly. "He left before he even knew. Took my father's money to disappear. Didn't even say goodbye." The words tasted bitter. "So yes, I made a mistake. I trusted the wrong person. But I'm not going to apologize for loving someone." Cole set the jar down and looked at her with something like respect. "Good. Don't apologize. Don't ever apologize for being human." The baby came on a Tuesday night, 3 weeks after Clara arrived at the cabin. She'd been feeling strange all day, pressure and tightness, and a low ache that wouldn't go away. By evening, she knew what was coming. "Cole." Her voice was steady despite the fear coursing through her. "I think it's time." He went pale, actually pale, which might have been funny under different circumstances. "You're sure?" "I'm sure." "I'll ride to town. Get the midwife. There's no time. And she won't come anyway. Not for me." Cole looked stricken. "Clara, I don't know how to— I've never— Neither have I." She tried to smile, but it came out more like a grimace as another contraction hit. "But babies have been born for thousands of years. We'll figure it out." They didn't figure it out so much as survive it. Clara labored through the night, pacing the cabin, gripping the furniture, crying out when the pain grew too intense. Cole stayed with her the whole time, his face a mask of controlled panic. He boiled water because he'd heard that was important. He gave her strips of leather to bite down on. He held her hand when she needed something to crush. As dawn broke, Clara felt the overwhelming urge to push. Cole helped her to the bed, his hands shaking. "I don't know what to do," he admitted. "Just catch her when she comes." "Her? I think it's a girl." And it was. After what felt like hours of pushing and pain and fear, Clara heard the most beautiful sound in the world, a baby's angry wail. Cole held a tiny, squirming, perfect little girl in his massive hands, staring at her like she was a miracle. "She's here," he said, his voice rough. "Clara, she's here and she's breathing and she's perfect." He placed the baby on Clara's chest, and the world narrowed to just this: the weight of her daughter, the warmth of her, the impossible reality of her. Clara touched the baby's face with trembling fingers and felt something shift inside her. All the shame, all the fear, all the darkness of the past months. It didn't disappear. But it was joined by something fiercer, stronger: love. Protective, overwhelming, transformative love. "Hello, little one," Clara whispered. "I'm your mama, and I'm going to keep you safe. I promise." Cole cleaned up quietly, giving them space. When Clara looked up at him, she saw tears on his scarred face. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." "She's beautiful," he said simply. "What will you name her?" Clara hadn't thought about names, hadn't let herself think that far ahead. But looking at her daughter's face, one came to her immediately. Hope. Her name is Hope. Cole smiled, really smiled, for the first time since she'd met him. "That's a good name." Clara held Hope close and knew that everything had changed. She was no longer just Clara Hayes, the ruined girl. She was Clara Hayes, mother of Hope, and that made her stronger than she'd ever been. Outside, the sun rose over Red Hollow Ridge, painting the brutal landscape in shades of gold and red. Inside the cabin, a new life had begun, and for the first time in a very long time, Clara believed they might actually survive this, might even thrive. The first week after Hope's birth passed in a blur of sleepless nights and constant feeding. Clara's body ached in new ways, and the exhaustion went deeper than anything she'd known. But every time she looked at her daughter's face, every time those tiny fingers wrapped around hers, she found strength she didn't know existed. Cole kept his distance, giving them space but staying close enough to help when needed. He'd fashioned a cradle from wood scraps, working late into the night to sand it smooth so there wouldn't be any splinters. He brought meals to Clara's room when she was too tired to come to the table. He never complained about the crying that pierced the quiet hours, never showed frustration when Clara stumbled through the cabin at 2 a.m. trying to soothe a fussy baby. "You're good at this," Clara told him one evening as she watched him rock Hope with surprising gentleness. The baby had been inconsolable for an hour, and Clara's arms had given out. Cole had taken her without hesitation, walking slow circles around the main room while humming something low and rhythmic. "Good at what?" He didn't look up from Hope's face. "Being, I don't know. A father, I guess." His step faltered slightly. "I'm not her father." "You're doing all the things a father does." "I'm helping. That's different." Clara pulled the shawl tighter around her shoulders. The nights were getting colder, autumn creeping in with its promise of harsh winter to come. "Is it though? Really?" Cole didn't answer, just kept walking, kept humming, until Hope's cries faded to whimpers and then to the soft breathing of sleep. He laid her carefully in the cradle and stepped back like he was afraid he might wake her. "You should rest while she's down," he said, still not meeting Clara's eyes. "I'll keep an ear out." "Cole, get some sleep, Clara." He left before she could push further. Clara listened to his boots on the porch, then the sound of the door to the barn opening and closing. He'd been sleeping out there more often lately, giving her the cabin to herself at night. She told herself it was practical, that it made sense with the baby crying so much. But part of her wondered if he was putting distance between them for other reasons. 2 weeks after Hope's birth, Clara woke to voices outside. Male voices, rough and loud. Her heart jumped into her throat. She grabbed Hope from the cradle and pressed back against the wall, listening. "Told you Braddock ain't here." That was Cole's voice, tight with controlled anger. "Then we'll wait." A different voice, one Clara didn't recognize. "Been wanting to see this miracle baby everyone's talking about." "You got no business here. We got business anywhere we please. This is open country, ain't it?" Clara heard the unmistakable sound of horses moving closer to the cabin. She clutched Hope tighter, her mind racing. The rifle was in the main room, leaning against the fireplace, too far to reach without being seen. "You take one more step toward that door. I'll put you down." Cole's voice had gone deadly quiet. Big talk for a man standing alone. "Who says I'm alone?" A pause. Clara held her breath. "You got someone in there with you, Braddock, that whore from town? She as pretty as they say under all that belly?" The sound of impact made Clara flinch. A body hitting the ground, hard. Then chaos, shouting, the thud of fists on flesh, horses whinnying in alarm. Clara knew she should stay hidden, knew she should protect Hope above all else. But something in her snapped at hearing that word again. Whore. Like it was all she'd ever be, all she'd ever amount to. Like Hope's existence was nothing but proof of Clara's worthlessness. She laid Hope in the cradle and grabbed the first thing her hand found, the heavy iron poker from the fireplace. Then she threw open the door. 3 men were in the yard. Cole had one pinned against the fence, his forearm pressed to the man's throat. The other 2 were circling like wolves, looking for an opening. They all turned when Clara appeared. "Well now," one of them said, grinning. "There she is." "Get back inside," Cole snapped without loosening his grip. "Listen to your man, sweetheart. This ain't no place for—" Clara swung the poker. She didn't think about it, didn't plan it, just swung with all the strength left in her arms. It connected with the man's shoulder hard enough to make him yelp and stumble backward. "You crazy bitch!" "Get off my land!" Clara's voice didn't sound like her own. It was low and dangerous, vibrating with rage she'd been holding back for months. "All of you. Get off my land right now." The man she'd hit was cradling his shoulder, his face twisted with pain and shock. "Your land! This ain't your—" "It's her land if I say it is." Cole released the man he'd been holding and turned to face the others. "And I say it is. So you heard the lady. Get out." For a moment, nobody moved. The 3 men looked at each other, weighing their options. Then the one Clara had hit spat in the dirt and jerked his head toward the horses. "Ain't worth it. Place probably got fleas anyway." They mounted up, but before they rode off, the leader turned back. "You're making a mistake, Braddock. Whole town's laughing at you. Man like you, reduced to playing house with another man's leavings. It's pathetic." Cole took a step forward, and the men kicked their horses into motion. They disappeared in a cloud of dust, their laughter echoing back across the empty land. Clara stood on the porch, the poker still gripped in her white-knuckled hand. Her whole body was shaking. Cole climbed the steps slowly, like he was approaching a spooked horse. "You all right?" he asked. "I hit him." "You did? I could have killed him." "Doubt it. Takes more than a shoulder hit to kill a man that stupid." Clara looked down at the poker, then at her hands. They were shaking so hard she could barely hold on. Cole gently pried the poker from her fingers and set it aside. "Come on, let's get you inside." "I shouldn't have come out. I should have stayed with Hope." "You did what you thought was right." "I could have made it worse." "You didn't." He guided her back into the cabin, his hand steady on her elbow. "You stood up for yourself. Nothing wrong with that." Clara sank into a chair at the table. Hope was still sleeping peacefully in her cradle, oblivious to the violence that had just unfolded. "They called me a whore." "I know. They called Hope." She couldn't finish the sentence. Cole pulled out the other chair and sat down heavily. There was blood on his knuckles, and a bruise was already forming along his jaw. "People say a lot of things. Doesn't make them true. It doesn't make them false either. Clara, I did lie down with a man who wasn't my husband. That's the truth. I am what they say I am." "No." Cole's voice was firm. "You're a woman who loved someone and got hurt. You're a woman who survived being thrown away by her own father. You're a woman who gave birth with nothing but grit and courage. You're a mother doing everything she can to protect her child. That's what you are." Clara's vision blurred. "Why do you care? You don't owe me anything." "Maybe I just got tired of watching people get kicked when they're down. There's more to it than that." Cole was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "I had a sister once, Sarah. She was younger than me by 3 years, sweet girl, always laughing. When she was 16, a man from the next town over courted her, said all the right things, made all the right promises. Then he got what he wanted and disappeared." Clara's chest tightened. What happened to her? My father threw her out, said she'd shamed the family. I was 18 working on a ranch 2 counties over. By the time I heard and got back, she was gone. Nobody would tell me where. He looked down at his damaged hands. Found out later she'd tried to work at a saloon. Owner took advantage, said she owed him money for room and board. She ran. Made it about 10 miles before the cold got her. They found her body in a ditch. Cole, I'm so sorry. I wasn't there to protect her. Wasn't there when she needed someone to tell her she was worth more than their judgment. So when I see someone else in that position, he met Clara's eyes. I can't walk away. I won't. Clara reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. His skin was warm, rough with calluses and scars. Thank you for seeing me, for seeing hope, for giving us a chance. He turned his hand over and squeezed her fingers gently. You don't need to thank me. I do, though. Every day I do. They sat like that for a moment, hands linked across the table, before Hope let out a cry that shattered the quiet. Clara pulled away to tend to her daughter, but the warmth of Cole's hand lingered. The next day, Cole rode into Red Hollow Ridge alone. Clara had argued against it, afraid of what the town might do, but he'd been firm. Need supplies, he'd said, and I need to make something clear to people. What's that? That you're not alone, that anyone who wants to mess with you has to go through me. He'd been gone for hours. Clara spent the time cleaning the cabin with nervous energy, washing clothes, preparing food she had no appetite for. Hope seemed to sense her mother's tension and fussed more than usual. When Cole finally returned, it was late afternoon. Clara heard the wagon before she saw it. Unusual, since he'd left on horseback. She stepped onto the porch with Hope in her arms and stopped short. Cole was driving a wagon loaded with supplies. But he wasn't alone. A woman sat beside him, thin and gray-haired, with a face carved by hard living but softened by kind eyes. Clara, Cole called, as he pulled the wagon to a stop. This is Esther Boone. She's a midwife. Lives about 5 miles south of here. The woman climbed down with practiced ease and approached the porch. She looked Clara up and down with a clinical eye, then smiled. You're the one who had her baby without help. Brave or foolish, I can't decide which. Clara shifted Hope protectively. I didn't have a choice. We always have choices. Yours just weren't good ones. Esther turned to Cole. You gonna help an old woman with those supplies, or are you planning to stand there looking pretty? Cole's mouth twitched. Yes, ma'am. While Cole unloaded the wagon, Esther followed Clara inside. The older woman moved through the cabin with the confidence of someone used to entering strange homes and taking charge. Let me see the baby, she said, holding out her arms. Clara hesitated, then carefully transferred Hope over. Esther examined her with gentle, efficient hands, checking her color, her breathing, the way she moved. She's healthy, Esther pronounced. Small but strong. You're feeding her well? As well as I can. And you? You healing properly? Any fever? Excessive bleeding? Clara felt her face heat. I'm fine. That's not what I asked. No fever. The bleeding slowed. I'm tired, but you're managing. Esther handed Hope back. Good. You need anything. Herbs for pain, advice on the baby. You send word. Cole knows where to find me. Why are you helping me? Esther's expression hardened slightly. Because I've lived in this territory for 40 years, and I've seen what happens when communities decide someone isn't worth helping. I've buried too many women and babies who might have lived if people had shown some basic decency. She moved toward the door, then paused. Besides, anyone who pisses off Martha Hennessy as much as you do can't be all bad. Despite everything, Clara laughed. It felt strange, almost foreign, but good. After Esther left with promises to check on them in a week, Clara helped Cole put away the supplies. There was more than usual: flour, sugar, coffee, dried beans, salted meat, fabric for making clothes, a dozen candles, soap, things they needed but couldn't afford. This is too much, Clara said. It's what we needed. Cole, how did you pay for all this? He didn't answer, just kept stacking cans on the shelf. Cole? Sold 2 head of cattle. Had been planning to anyway. You sold cattle to buy supplies for me and Hope. Sold cattle to buy supplies for winter. We're all living here, aren't we? Clara wanted to argue, but the set of his jaw told her it would be pointless. Instead, she said, What happened in town? Besides finding Esther? His hand stilled. Word spread about yesterday, about the men who came here. And? And some people think I should have let them have their fun. Think I'm being foolish, protecting a woman like you. The words stung even though Clara had expected them. A woman like me. That's what they said, not what I think. What did you tell them? Cole turned to face her fully. Told them that any man who had a problem with how I run my land was welcome to take it up with me directly. Told them that you and Hope are under my protection, and that's not changing. He paused. Also told them that if anyone else comes here looking to cause trouble, I won't be as gentle as I was yesterday. You think that'll stop them? No, but it'll make them think twice. Over the following weeks, Clara began to understand what Cole had meant. Nobody came to the cabin with violence, but the whispers grew louder. When Cole went to town, people who'd once been friendly turned their backs. Business owners who'd known him for years suddenly didn't have time for conversation. Children were pulled away when he passed, as if his very presence might corrupt them. Clara saw it wearing on him, though he never complained. He'd come back from town with tight shoulders and a hard expression, and it would take hours before he'd relax again. She hated it, hated that he was suffering because of her. You could make this easier on yourself, she told him one evening after Hope was asleep. They were sitting at the table, Cole mending a bridle while Clara sewed a dress for Hope. Tell people I'm just a hired girl, a servant. They'd probably accept that. No, Cole, no, Clara. I'm not going to lie about who you are. I'm not asking you to lie, just to reframe things. He looked up from the leather in his hands. You want me to pretend you're less than what you are? To make other people comfortable? I want you to stop losing friends because of me. They weren't friends if they'd abandoned me over this. That's easy to say when you're not the one being abandoned. You think I don't know what that feels like? His voice rose slightly. I've been alone most of my life, Clara. My mother died. My father drank himself into the grave. My sister... He stopped, took a breath. The difference is, this time I'm choosing to stand with someone instead of walking away. That means something. Clara's throat tightened. It means you're sacrificing your place in the community. Maybe the community needs to be better. That's not how the world works. Then maybe it should be. They fell into silence, the only sound the crackle of the fire and the scrape of Cole's knife against leather. Clara wanted to argue more, wanted to make him see reason. But part of her, a part she was afraid to acknowledge, was grateful. Grateful that someone finally thought she was worth standing up for. A month after Hope's birth, the first real cold snap hit. Clara woke to frost on the windows and her breath misting in the air. She pulled on the warmest dress she had and wrapped Hope in every blanket she could find before venturing out to the main room. Cole was already up, feeding wood into the fireplace. He'd clearly been awake for a while. His hair was wet from washing, and he'd made coffee that filled the cabin with its rich smell. "Morning," he said without turning around. "It's freezing. It's going to get colder. This is just the start." He closed the fireplace door and stood. "I need to ride out to the line shack today. Check that it's stocked for winter. Probably be gone 2 days." Clara's stomach dropped. 2 days? There's plenty of wood stacked on the porch. Food in the cellar. You'll be fine. I know, She shifted Hope in her arms. What if something happens? What kind of something? I don't know, anything. Cole crossed to her and placed his hands on her shoulders. His touch was warm, steady. You're stronger than you think. And if there's real trouble, you fire 3 shots from the rifle. Esther will hear it and come. So will the Hendersons. They're the closest ranch, about 8 miles east. 8 miles is a long way. It is, but it's better than nothing. He squeezed her shoulders gently. You can do this, Clara. I know you can. She wanted to believe him, wanted to feel as confident as he seemed to think she should be. But the thought of being alone for 2 days with a newborn and winter setting in made her want to cry. Cole left an hour later, his saddlebags packed with supplies. Clara stood on the porch with Hope, watching him ride away until he was just a dark speck against the pale sky. Then she went inside and locked the door. The first day passed slowly. Clara kept busy with chores, with feeding Hope, with trying not to think about how empty the cabin felt. She made soup for dinner but barely ate any of it. Every sound outside made her jump. Was it the wind or something else? Was that an animal or a person? By nightfall, she was exhausted from worry. She built up the fire, checked the locks twice, and climbed into bed with Hope tucked against her side. The rifle leaned against the wall within arm's reach. Sleep came in fits and starts. Every time she drifted off, some noise would jerk her awake. The creak of settling wood, the howl of wind, the distant cry of something wild. Morning came as a relief, gray light seeping through the windows. Clara fed Hope, made coffee, ate bread that tasted like sawdust. One more day. She could manage one more day. She was washing dishes when she heard the horses. Her whole body went rigid. Slowly, carefully, she set down the plate and moved to the window. 3 riders were coming up the road. Her heart hammered as she tried to make out their faces. Not the men from before, different ones. But that didn't make it better. Clara grabbed the rifle and checked that it was loaded. Then she positioned herself near the window where she could see but not be easily seen. Hope was asleep in the cradle. Please stay asleep, Clara thought. Please. The riders stopped in front of the cabin. One of them dismounted, a tall man with a thick beard and clothes that marked him as wealthy by territory standards. He approached the porch with the confidence of someone used to getting what he wanted. "Hello, the house," he called. Clara said nothing. "I'm looking for Clara Hayes. I'm told she lives here." Still, Clara stayed silent. "My name is Vernon Pritchard. I own the lumber mill in Red Hollow Ridge. I'd like to speak with Miss Hayes about a business matter." Business matter. Clara's grip tightened on the rifle. She knew what that meant. She'd heard similar offers before, back when her situation first became known. Men who thought a desperate woman would be willing to accept certain arrangements. "Miss Hayes?" Pritchard tried again. "I mean no harm. I only want to talk." Clara made a decision. She opened the door but kept the rifle visible, pointed at the ground but ready. "I'm Clara Hayes." Pritchard tipped his hat. "Ma'am, thank you for speaking with me. You have 2 minutes, then you leave." "Of course." He glanced at the rifle. "There's no need for weapons. As I said, I only want to talk." "Then talk. I'll be direct. I'm a widower, Miss Hayes. My wife died 3 years back, and I've been managing alone since. It's not ideal. I need someone to run my household, care for my home. I'm prepared to offer you employment in that capacity." Clara's jaw tightened. Employment? Yes, room and board, plus a small salary. You'd have your own quarters, of course. And the child would be provided for. Provided for how? Pritchard shifted his weight. "There's an orphanage in Silver Creek. Good place. Clean. The child would be well cared for while you work." The words hit Clara like a physical blow. "You want me to give up my daughter?" "Not give up. Simply place her somewhere appropriate while you earn a living. It's practical, Miss Hayes. You can't expect to work with an infant in tow." "Get off my land." "I'm offering you a legitimate opportunity. You're offering to separate me from my child so I can be your servant. The answer is no." "You're in no position to refuse. A woman in your circumstances—" Clara raised the rifle, not pointing it at him, but making her intent clear. "You have 1 minute to get on that horse and leave. After that, I start shooting." Pritchard's face darkened. "You're making a mistake. Braddock won't keep you forever. And when he's done with you, where will you go?" 50 seconds. He stared at her for a long moment, then turned and strode back to his horse. The 3 men mounted up, and Pritchard called back, "When you change your mind, you know where to find me." They rode off. Clara stood on the porch until they were out of sight, then her legs gave out. She sank down onto the rough planks, the rifle across her lap, and tried to stop shaking. Hope began to cry. Clara forced herself to stand, to go inside, to lift her daughter and hold her close. "Nobody's taking you from me," she whispered fiercely. "Nobody. Ever." When Cole returned the next afternoon, Clara was sitting at the table staring at nothing. Hope was asleep. The cabin was cold because Clara had forgotten to feed the fire. "Clara?" Cole dropped his saddlebags and crossed to her quickly. "What happened?" She told him. About Pritchard, about the offer, about the orphanage. Cole's expression grew darker with every word. "He came here alone?" Cole asked when she finished. "With 2 other men. But he did the talking. And he suggested you give up Hope." "Suggested? Like it was reasonable. Like I should be grateful for the opportunity." Cole was quiet for a moment, his hands clenched into fists. Then he said, I'm going to town. Cole, don't. It'll just make things worse. It'll make things clear. Please. Clara grabbed his arm. I don't want you getting in trouble because of me. I already told him no. It's done. It's not done if he thinks he can come back. He won't. I made that clear. Cole looked at her, really looked at her, and some of the fury in his face softened. You scared him off? I scared him off. With the rifle? With the rifle and my winning personality. The corner of his mouth twitched. Your winning personality. It's very intimidating. I'm sure it is. He sank into the chair across from her. You did good, Clara. Handled it right. I wanted to shoot him, but you didn't. Only because I didn't want to clean up the mess. This time Cole actually smiled. It transformed his face, made him look younger, less burdened. Practical reasoning. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Clara said quietly, How long can we keep doing this? Doing what? This. Living out here pretending the rest of the world doesn't exist. Eventually something's going to give. Cole leaned back in his chair. Maybe. But not today. Today we're still here, and hope's still with you, and that's enough. Clara wished she could believe it was that simple, but she'd learned the hard way that peace was temporary, that safety was an illusion. The world didn't forget. It didn't forgive. It just waited for the right moment to strike. Still, for now, in this cabin, with this man who'd shown her more kindness than her own father, she could pretend. She could hold her daughter and eat warm meals and sleep without fear. For now, that would have to be enough. Winter came hard and fast, transforming the landscape into something harsh and unforgiving. Snow fell in thick sheets, piling against the cabin walls, and making the short walk to the barn feel like a journey across the tundra. Clara had never experienced cold like this. Back in Red Hollow Ridge, her father's house had been drafty but adequate. Here, every morning brought a new battle against the freeze. Ice in the water bucket, frost creeping across the windows in crystalline patterns, wind that found every gap in the walls and exploited it mercilessly. But inside the cabin, there was warmth. Cole kept the fire burning constantly, waking twice each night to add wood. Clara learned to bank the coals properly, to make meals that would stick to their ribs and keep them full longer. Hope grew despite the cold, her tiny face filling out, her cries growing stronger. They fell into a rhythm, the three of them. Cole would rise before dawn to tend the animals, breaking ice in the water troughs and hauling feed through knee-deep snow. Clara would have coffee ready when he came back in, his face red from the wind, ice crystals clinging to his beard. They'd eat breakfast together, Clara feeding Hope while Cole planned the day's work. Then he'd head back out, and Clara would spend her hours keeping the cabin warm, keeping Hope fed, keeping herself from going stir-crazy in the endless white silence. Some days they barely spoke. Other days, they couldn't stop talking. Clara told him about her childhood, about her mother who died when she was 10, about the loneliness of growing up in a house where affection was scarce and criticism abundant. Cole talked about his years working ranches across the territory, about the men he'd known and the places he'd seen, about his sister Sarah and how her loss had carved something permanent out of his heart. You think about her often? Clara asked one evening. They were sitting near the fire, Hope asleep in her cradle. Outside, wind howled like something alive and angry. Every day. Cole was whittling a piece of wood, his knife moving with practiced precision. Used to make me angry. Now it just makes me sad. What was she like? Really like, I mean. Not just sweet and laughing. Cole paused, considering. Stubborn. Couldn't tell her anything once she'd made up her mind. And she had this way of seeing the best in people, even when they didn't deserve it. He smiled faintly. Drove me crazy sometimes. I'd tell her someone was no good, and she'd say I was too quick to judge. Sounds like she was kind. Too kind. That was the problem. Clara understood that. She'd been too trusting once, too willing to believe in promises that turned out to be hollow. You can't blame her for that. I don't blame her. I blame the people who took advantage. The knife bit deeper into the wood. And I blame myself for not being there. You couldn't have known. Doesn't matter. I should have been there anyway. They sat in silence for a while. The only sounds, the crackle of fire and the scrape of Cole's knife. Then Clara said quietly, I'm glad you're here now, for what it's worth. Cole looked up at her, his gray eyes reflecting the firelight. It's worth a lot. The moment stretched between them, charged with something Clara didn't have words for. Then hope stirred in her sleep, breaking the spell, and Clara turned away to check on her daughter. 3 months into winter, Esther Boone made her way through the snow to check on them. She arrived on a sturdy mule, bundled in so many layers she looked twice her normal size. Cole helped her down and into the cabin, where she immediately began shedding coats and scarves. "Didn't think you'd make it in this weather," Clara said, pouring hot coffee. "Takes more than snow to keep me from my rounds." Esther accepted the cup gratefully. "Besides, wanted to see how the baby's doing. And you." She examined Hope with her usual thoroughness, pronouncing her healthy and growing well. Then she turned her attention to Clara, asking pointed questions about her recovery, her strength, her state of mind. "I'm fine," Clara insisted. "You're tired. I can see it in your face." "I have a 3-month-old baby. Tired comes with the territory." "True enough." Esther glanced around the cabin, taking in the tidy space, the well-stocked shelves, the warmth. "You're doing well here. Better than I expected, honestly." "What did you expect?" "Honestly? I expected you to be half-starved and miserable by now. Most women in your position would be." She looked at Cole, who was pretending not to listen while he organized tools near the door. "You've got yourself a good man there." Clara felt heat rise in her face. "He's been kind." "Kind doesn't cover it. I've known Cole Braddock for 5 years now. Never seen him let anyone close. The fact that he took you in, kept you safe, treats you like a person instead of a burden. That's more than kind. That's something else entirely." "Esther, I'm not saying you owe him anything. You don't. But I am saying you're lucky to have him, and he's lucky to have you, whether he's figured that out yet or not." Before Clara could respond, Esther was gathering her things and preparing to leave. Cole helped her back onto the mule, and she rode off into the white landscape with a wave. "She talks too much," Cole said as they watched her go. "She talks the right amount." "That what you think?" Clara looked up at him. His face was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes. A question, maybe. Or a hope. "Yeah, that's what I think." He nodded once, then turned back to the barn without another word. But Clara caught the hint of a smile on his face before he turned away. The peace lasted until early March, when the snow began to melt and the roads became passable again. Clara should have known it was too good to last. Should have known that winter's isolation had only delayed the inevitable. She was hanging laundry on the line Cole had strung between the cabin and the barn when she saw the riders. 5 of them, moving at a deliberate pace up the road. Her stomach dropped even before she recognized the lead horse. Her father. Clara's hands froze on the wet sheet she'd been hanging. For a moment, she couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then training kicked in, the survival instincts she'd developed over months of being hunted and judged. She dropped the laundry basket and ran for the cabin. "Cole!" She burst through the door, startling him from the table where he'd been mending tack. "My father's coming. He's got men with him." Cole was on his feet instantly. "How many?" 5 total. Maybe more behind them, I couldn't tell. "Get Hope. Go to the back room and lock the door." "Cole, do it, Clara. Now." She wanted to argue, wanted to stand beside him, but Hope was more important than pride. She scooped her daughter from the cradle and ran to the back room, slamming the door and turning the lock. Then she pressed her ear against the wood and listened. Heavy footsteps on the porch, the sound of the door opening, her father's voice, cold and sharp as a knife. "Braddock." "Hayes." Cole's voice was level, giving nothing away. "What brings you out here?" "You know damn well what brings me out here. I'm taking my daughter back." "Your daughter made it clear she doesn't want to go back." "My daughter is a whore and a liar, and she doesn't get to make decisions. I'm her father. I have rights." Clara's hands clenched into fists. She held Hope tighter, her daughter's warm weight the only thing keeping her grounded. "You gave up your rights when you sold her to me," Cole said. His voice had gone hard, dangerous. "Transaction's done. She stays here. I've reconsidered the arrangement. That's not how it works. It works however I say it works." Harold's boots scraped against the floor as he moved further into the cabin. "Where is she?" "Doesn't matter where she is. You're not taking her." "You think you can stop me? You think one man can stand against 5? I think you should leave while you still can." Someone laughed. One of the men with Harold. "Big talk from someone who's outnumbered." "Numbers don't mean much when you're standing in my house, on my land, threatening people under my protection. Clara could hear the restrained violence in Cole's voice. "You're trespassing. Leave." "Not without my daughter." And the bastard, she whelped. Clara's vision went red. Before she could think, before she could talk herself out of it, she was unlocking the door and stepping into the main room. 5 pairs of eyes turned to her. Her father looked older than she remembered, harder. The men with him were strangers, hired muscle, probably. Men who'd do whatever Harold paid them to do. "I'm not going with you," Clara said. Her voice shook, but she kept it steady. "And you're not taking Hope." Harold's face twisted. "You don't get a say in this, girl. You're coming home, and that baby is going to the orphanage where it belongs. Hope is a she, not an it, and she belongs with her mother. You're not fit to be anyone's mother. That's not your decision to make anymore. The hell it isn't. I'm your father." "You stopped being my father when you sold me like cattle." The words ripped out of Clara, months of suppressed rage finally breaking free. "You threw me away. Told the whole town I was worthless. And now you want to come back and take the one good thing I have? No, you don't get to do that." Harold took a step toward her. Cole moved between them, a wall of muscle and barely controlled fury. "Touch her, and you won't leave here walking," Cole said quietly. "You threatening me, Braddock? I'm making a promise." The tension in the room ratcheted up to a breaking point. Clara could see the calculation in her father's eyes, weighing his options. He was a bully, but he wasn't stupid. 5 against 1 might seem like good odds, but Cole was bigger than any 2 of them combined, and he had the home advantage. "The child doesn't belong to you," Harold said, shifting tactics. "She's my blood, my grandchild. I have a legal right." "You have no rights." Clara's voice cut through his words. "You made that clear when you threw me out. You wanted nothing to do with me or Hope. You said we shamed you. Well, fine, we're out of your life. Stay out of ours." "This isn't over." "Yes, it is." Clara took a step forward, still holding Hope. Her daughter had started to fuss, picking up on the tension. "You want to know why I won't go with you? It's not because of Cole. It's not because of this cabin or this land. It's because I would rather die out here in the dirt than spend one more day under your roof, pretending to be grateful for crumbs of affection you never actually gave me." Harold's face went purple. "You ungrateful—" "I'm done being grateful. I'm done apologizing for existing. And I'm done letting you make me feel like I'm worth nothing." Clara's voice cracked, but she pushed through. "You want to take Hope? You'll have to kill me first, and you'll have to go through him." She nodded at Cole. "You think you can do that?" The silence stretched. Then one of the hired men shifted nervously and said, "Maybe we should go, Mr. Hayes. This ain't worth—" "Shut your mouth," Harold snapped. But Clara could see the defeat creeping into his posture. He'd expected her to crumble, to submit the way she always had. Finding her standing firm, refusing to break, it had thrown him. "Last chance," Cole said softly. "Leave now, or I'll make you leave. And trust me, you won't like how I do it." Harold looked at Clara one more time. She stared back, unflinching. Then he spat on the floor and turned toward the door. "You're dead to me," he said without looking back. "I've been dead to you for months," Clara replied. "Now it's official." Harold stormed out, his men following. Clara heard them mount up, heard the thunder of hooves as they rode away. Only when the sound had faded completely did she allow herself to sag against the wall. Cole was beside her in an instant, steadying her. "You all right?" "I don't know." Clara looked down at Hope, who had settled again now that the shouting was over. "I just told my father to go to hell. You told him the truth. Same thing, in his mind." "Then his mind's not worth worrying about." Cole gently took Hope from her arms and carried the baby to the cradle. "You were brave, Clara, standing up to him like that." "I was terrified." "Bravery isn't not being scared. It's being scared and doing it anyway." Clara managed a weak laugh. "Who told you that?" "My mother. She was full of wisdom like that." He turned back to face her. "You meant what you said? About dying before going back with him?" "Every word." Something shifted in Cole's expression. "Good. Because I meant what I said too. He comes back. He goes through me." "Cole, I can't ask you to." "You're not asking. I'm offering." Clara crossed to him and, before she could second-guess herself, wrapped her arms around his waist. She felt him stiffen in surprise, then slowly, carefully, his arms came around her shoulders. They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other while Hope slept peacefully nearby. "Thank you," Clara whispered against his chest. "You don't need to thank me." "I do, though. Every single day, I do." That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the confrontation, kept seeing her father's face, kept hearing his words. "You're dead to me." She should feel relieved, should feel free, but all she felt was hollow. She got up and padded to the main room, intending to make tea. Cole was there, sitting at the table in the dark, his rifle across his lap. "Couldn't sleep either?" Clara asked. "Wanted to keep watch, in case he comes back." "You think he will? Tonight? Probably not. But eventually? Yeah. Men like your father don't give up when they're told no. They just get meaner about it." Clara sank into the chair across from him. "I'm sorry you're in this mess because of me. Stop apologizing for existing. That's what he trained you to do, and you need to break the habit. It's not that simple. Nothing worth doing is simple." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Clara said, "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Why did you really buy me? And don't give me that line about needing help around the place. What was the real reason?" Cole was quiet for so long, Clara thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. "Because when I saw you standing there, looking at me like I was your last chance at survival, I saw Sarah. I saw what would have happened to her if someone had stepped in. And I thought maybe I couldn't save my sister, but I could save you." Clara's throat tightened. "I'm not your sister, Cole. I know that. Do you? Because sometimes I wonder if that's all you see when you look at me, a stand-in for someone you lost. That's not—" He stopped, ran a hand through his hair. "At first, maybe. At first, yeah, I saw Sarah, but now?" He looked at her directly, his gray eyes intense. "Now I see you, Clara. I see a woman who's stronger than she knows, who loves her daughter fierce enough to stare down 5 armed men, who makes this cabin feel like something more than just a place to sleep." He paused. "I see you, not her. You." Clara felt tears building, but refused to let them fall. "What are we doing here, Cole, really?" "Surviving. Building something. I don't know. What do you want us to be doing?" "I want—" Clara stopped, afraid to voice what she was feeling, afraid that putting it into words would break whatever fragile thing was growing between them. "I want this to be real. Not just an arrangement, not just you protecting me out of guilt or obligation. I want it to mean something." "It does mean something." "What?" Cole stood and crossed to her. He knelt down so they were eye level, his hands resting on the arms of her chair. "It means I wake up every morning, and the first thing I think about is making sure you and Hope are safe. It means I'd fight your father and his whole damn army, if that's what it takes to keep you here. It means that somewhere along the way, this stopped being about Sarah and started being about you." He searched her face. "That real enough for you?" Clara couldn't speak, couldn't do anything but stare at this man who'd shown her more kindness than anyone in her entire life. Then, without thinking, she leaned forward and kissed him. It was brief, chaste, just a press of lips, barely more than a touch. But it said everything Clara couldn't put into words. When she pulled back, Cole's eyes were wide with surprise. "Sorry," she stammered. "I shouldn't have—" "Don't apologize." His voice was hoarse. "Don't ever apologize for that. I just thought he—" "Clara." He cupped her face with one rough hand. "I've been wanting to do that for weeks, but I didn't want to push. Didn't want you to think I expected anything because you're here. What if I want you to expect something? Then we should probably talk about what that means. Or we could just see where it goes." Cole's thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "You sure about this?" "I'm not sure about anything, but I'm less unsure about this than I've been about anything in a long time." He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his whole face. "That might be the most complicated way anyone's ever said yes. I'm a complicated person. I'm starting to figure that out." He kissed her properly then, slow and careful, like she was something precious. Clara melted into it, into him, feeling something tight in her chest finally loosen. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers. "Your father comes back," he said quietly. "He's not just fighting me. He's fighting both of us. Together. You understand?" Together, Clara repeated. I like the sound of that. They stayed like that for a while, wrapped in each other, while outside the wind howled and the night pressed against the windows. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Harold wouldn't give up easily. The town would keep judging. Winter would eventually give way to spring, and with spring would come decisions they'd have to make about the future. But tonight, in this moment, Clara felt something she hadn't felt in so long she'd almost forgotten what it was like. Hope. Real hope. Not just the name she'd given her daughter. Hope that maybe, just maybe, she could build a life worth living. That she could be more than the shame everyone had tried to pin on her. That she and Cole and Hope could become something real. A family forged not by blood or obligation, but by choice. The next morning brought clouds that promised more snow. Clara woke in her own bed, alone. But the memory of Cole's kiss still tingled on her lips. She could hear him in the main room, talking softly to Hope. The sound made her smile. When she emerged, dressed and ready for the day, Cole looked up from where he was cradling Hope. Morning. Morning. Clara poured herself coffee, suddenly shy. Did she wake you? Just a little. She's getting better at sleeping through. 3 months old and already considerate. We're raising a miracle child. We, Cole repeated softly, testing the word. Clara met his eyes. We, if that's all right. More than all right. They fell into their morning routine, but everything felt different now, charged with possibility. Clara caught Cole watching her as she made breakfast. He caught her watching him as he pulled on his coat to head to the barn. When their hands brushed passing the coffee pot, both of them felt it, that electric connection that had been building for months and had finally been acknowledged. Around midday, Clara was feeding Hope when she heard horses again. Her whole body tensed, but Cole was already at the window. It's Esther, he called. She's got someone with her. Clara secured Hope in her cradle and joined him at the window. Sure enough, Esther was riding up on her mule, and behind her came a wagon driven by a man Clara didn't recognize. They went out to meet them. The stranger was older, gray-haired, with the weathered look of someone who'd spent his life working outdoors. He climbed down from the wagon with a grunt. This is Tom Henderson, Esther said by way of introduction. Owns the ranch 8 miles east. Tom, this is Cole Braddock and Clara Hayes. Henderson nodded to both of them. Heard you had some trouble yesterday. Clara's stomach dropped. How did you... Harold Hayes stopped at my place on his way back to town, was running his mouth about his ungrateful daughter and the man hiding her. Henderson spat in the dirt. Told him he was a fool and to get off my land. You did? Clara couldn't hide her surprise. I did. I've known Harold Hayes for 20 years, and he's always been a self-righteous son of a bitch. What he did to you, throwing you out like that, it was wrong. And I told him so. Thank you, Clara said quietly. Don't thank me yet. I'm here because I wanted to warn you. Harold's not done. He's gathering support in town, trying to get a group together to come back here and take the child by force. Claims he's got a legal right as the grandfather. Cole's jaw tightened. When? Don't know for sure, but soon. Maybe a week, maybe less. Henderson looked between them. You got any family, either of you? Anyone who could help? No, Cole said. It's just us. Then you need to make a choice. You can run, try to get to Silver Creek or beyond, somewhere Harold can't reach you, or you can stand and fight. But if you fight, you're going to need help. I'm not running, Clara said immediately. I'm done running. Henderson nodded as if he'd expected that answer. Then you'll need allies. I'm offering. Me and my boys will stand with you if it comes to that. Why? Cole asked bluntly. You don't know us. No, but I know Harold Hayes, and I know what it's like to watch the strong crush the weak and do nothing about it. I'm tired of doing nothing. He glanced at Esther. I'm not the only one either. Esther nodded. There are good people in this territory, Cole. People who are sick of watching Harold and his ilk decide who's worthy and who isn't. You give the word, and they'll come. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. I don't know what to say. Say you'll fight, Henderson replied. Say you'll stand your ground, because if you do, you won't be standing alone. Cole extended his hand, and Henderson shook it firmly. We'll stand, Cole said, and we'll be grateful for the help. After Henderson and Esther left, Clara and Cole stood in the yard, watching them disappear down the road. The sun was trying to break through the clouds, sending weak rays across the snow-covered ground. "It's really happening," Clara said. "We're going to have to fight." "Looks like it." "Are you scared?" Cole considered the question. "Yeah, but I'm also ready. Been letting people push me around with their opinions and their judgment for too long. Time to push back." Clara took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "Together?" "Together," he confirmed. "Whatever comes, we face it together." They walked back to the cabin hand in hand, ready to prepare for whatever storm was coming. Because storm was coming, Clara could feel it in her bones. Her father wouldn't give up. He'd come back with more men, more determination, more certainty that he was in the right. But this time, Clara wouldn't face him alone. This time, she had Cole. She had friends she hadn't even known existed. And most importantly, she had something worth fighting for. Hope slept peacefully in her cradle, unaware of the battle brewing around her. Clara watched her daughter's chest rise and fall and made a silent promise. Whatever it took, however hard the fight, she would protect this child. Would give her a life free from shame and judgment. And if that meant standing against her own father, against the whole town, against the whole damn territory, then that's exactly what she'd do. The week that followed felt like waiting for an executioner's blade to fall. Clara went through the motions of daily life, feeding Hope, cooking meals, washing clothes. But her mind was elsewhere, constantly scanning the horizon for riders. Cole spent his days fortifying the cabin, reinforcing the door, checking and rechecking their ammunition supply. Neither of them slept well. On the third day, Tom Henderson returned with his two sons, both strapping young men in their 20s who looked like they could handle themselves in a fight. They brought supplies, extra ammunition, dried food, blankets. Henderson also brought news. "Harold's got 8 men committed so far," he said as they gathered in the cabin. "Maybe more. He's telling everyone who'll listen that you're keeping his grandchild against her will, that the baby needs proper Christian upbringing." Clara's laugh was bitter. Christian upbringing, from the man who threw his pregnant daughter out like garbage. "People believe what they want to believe," Henderson's older son said. His name was James, and he had kind eyes. "But there's plenty who don't buy his story. My pa's not the only one willing to stand with you." "How many?" Cole asked. 7 for sure, maybe 10 if we're lucky. Cole did the math silently. Even with 10, they'd be roughly even numbers with Harold's group. Not great odds, but better than facing them alone. "They know what they're signing up for?" Clara asked. "This could get ugly." "They know," Henderson confirmed. "And they're coming anyway. Good people get tired of watching bad people win. Sometimes you gotta make a stand." That night, after the Hendersons had left and Hope was asleep, Clara and Cole sat by the fire. She was mending one of his shirts, her needle moving through the fabric with automatic precision. Cole was cleaning his rifle, the familiar ritual seeming to calm him. "You ever been in a real fight?" Clara asked. "Not just a brawl. A real fight where people might die." Cole's hands stilled. "Once. 5 years back, I was working a ranch near the border. Raiders came through trying to steal cattle. 3 of us against maybe a dozen of them. We held them off, but..." He set down the cleaning rod. 2 good men died that day. Men with families, with futures. And for what? Some stolen cattle that probably weren't worth their lives. "Do you regret it? Fighting?" "I regret that it had to happen. But would I do it again if I had the choice?" He looked at her. "Yeah, sometimes fighting's the only option left." Clara set down her mending. "I keep thinking about Hope, about what happens to her if this goes wrong. If my father wins, if he takes her..." "He won't. You can't promise that." "No," Cole admitted. "But I can promise I'll die before I let him take her from you. Is that enough?" Clara's throat tightened. "I don't want you to die for us, Cole. I want you to live with us. Then we'll both fight to make that happen." She moved from her chair to sit beside him on the floor, leaning against his shoulder. He wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. They stayed like that for a long time, drawing strength from each other's presence. "I'm scared," Clara whispered. "Me too. But you're still doing this." "Because you're worth it. Hope's worth it. And maybe I'm tired of being scared." The attack came on the 7th day, just after dawn. Clara was nursing Hope when she heard Cole's warning shout from outside. She'd been expecting it, had rehearsed what she'd do, but her heart still jackhammered as she laid Hope in the specially prepared box Cole had built. Thick wood on all sides, lined with blankets to muffle sound. It wasn't perfect, but it would protect her daughter from stray bullets. Clara grabbed the rifle and positioned herself by the window like Cole had taught her. Through the glass, she could see them coming, a line of riders, maybe 10 or 12, her father at the front. They weren't rushing, weren't charging. They were coming slow and deliberate, meant to intimidate. Cole was at the gate, standing alone. Clara's breath caught. Where were the others? Henderson had promised help, but she saw no sign of reinforcements. The riders stopped about 30 yards out. Harold dismounted, and 2 men flanked him. The rest stayed on their horses, hands near their weapons. "Braddock," Harold called. "Last chance. Send out my daughter and grandchild, and we'll leave peaceful." "Can't do that," Cole replied, his voice carrying across the distance. "Then you're choosing violence. You're the one who rode out here with armed men. I'm just standing on my own land." Harold's face darkened. "That bastard child has my blood. She belongs with family, not with some stranger playing house with a whore." Clara felt rage surge through her. She wanted to scream, to shoot, to make him hurt the way his words hurt. But she forced herself to stay still, to trust Cole. "You got one more chance," Cole said. His hand moved to his hip, resting on his revolver. "Turn around and ride away. Don't come back. Clara and Hope stay here and you leave them alone. Do that, and nobody gets hurt." "You think you can take all of us?" one of Harold's men called out, laughing. "I think you should worry less about how many you are and more about how many you'll be when this is done." "Big talk for—" The man's words cut off as riders emerged from behind the barn. Tom Henderson and his sons, plus 5 other men Clara didn't recognize. They fanned out beside Cole, forming a line, not outnumbering Harold's group, but making it clear that Cole wasn't alone. Harold's confidence wavered. Clara could see it in the way he shifted his weight and how his eyes darted from face to face. "Henderson," Harold said, "this isn't your fight. I'm making it my fight. You want to get to that girl and her baby? You go through all of us. This is about family, about what's right." "Right?" one of the men beside Henderson spat. "You threw your own daughter out, beat her from what I hear, sold her off like property, and now you got the gall to talk about family? You make me sick, Hayes." "You don't know the full story. Don't need to. I know enough." The standoff stretched. Clara's finger rested on the trigger, her palms sweating. Hope made a small sound from her box, and Clara's heart nearly stopped. "Please stay quiet, baby. Please." Harold's jaw worked like he was chewing on something bitter. Then he said, "You're all making a mistake. When this is over, when people hear how you stood against a man trying to save his grandchild from corruption—" "When this is over," Cole interrupted, "people will hear how 12 armed men rode onto private property to terrorize a woman and her baby. They'll hear how you were told to leave peaceful and chose violence instead. That's the story that'll get told." "You self-righteous son of a—" Harold's hand moved toward his gun. Several things happened at once. Cole's revolver cleared leather with practiced speed. Henderson's rifle came up. Clara saw one of Harold's men draw, saw the barrel swing toward Cole. She didn't think, just aimed and fired. The shot cracked through the morning air. The man yelped and dropped his gun, clutching his shoulder. Blood seeped between his fingers. The yard exploded into chaos. Men shouted, horses reared, hands flew to weapons. But Cole's voice cut through it all, loud and commanding. "Hold!" Everyone froze. Clara's rifle was already trained on her next target, her father. Her hands were steady, her breath controlled. She'd never felt calmer. "Next person who draws," Cole said quietly, "dies. I promise you that." Harold stared at his injured man, who was swaying in his saddle, face pale. "You shot him." "Clara shot him," Cole corrected. "And she'll shoot you too if you give her reason. Woman's got a steady hand and good aim." Clara spoke then, her voice ringing clear. "I'm not hiding anymore, Papa. Not from you, not from anyone. You want hope? You'll have to kill me first, and then you'll have to kill every person standing here. Is your pride worth that many lives?" Harold's face was purple with rage. "You would shoot your own father? You stopped being my father months ago. You're just a bitter old man trying to control something that was never his to control." She adjusted her aim slightly. "Leave, now, while you still can." "This isn't over." "Yes, it is." Clara's voice was iron. "It's over because I say it's over. You don't get to decide my life anymore. You don't get to shame me or hurt me or take my daughter. You're done." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then the injured man said weakly, "Mr. Hayes, I need a doctor, please." Harold looked around at the armed men facing him, at his daughter with a rifle trained on his chest, at the blood dripping from his hired gun's shoulder. Calculation flickered across his face. He was weighing his options, measuring the cost. Finally, he spat in the dirt. "You're all going to regret this." "Only regret I got is not doing it sooner," Henderson replied. Harold mounted his horse with jerky, angry movements. His men followed suit, the injured one needing help to stay in the saddle. They turned and started riding away, but Harold pulled up after a few yards and looked back. "You're dead to me, Clara. You and that bastard both." Clara lowered the rifle slightly. "I know. I've been dead to you for a while now. Difference is, I don't care anymore." She watched them ride away, her father's back rigid with fury, until they disappeared over the rise. Only then did she lower the rifle completely. Her hand started shaking so hard she nearly dropped it. Cole was through the door in seconds, taking the rifle from her and pulling her into his arms. She collapsed against him, all the fear and adrenaline draining out at once. "You did good," he murmured into her hair. "So good, Clara. You were amazing." "I shot someone. I actually shot someone. You protected your family. There's no shame in that." Family. The words settled over her like a warm blanket. Henderson and his men filed into the cabin, congratulating her, telling her she'd done the right thing. Clara barely heard them. She moved to Hope's box and lifted her daughter out. The baby was crying now, frightened by all the noise, and Clara held her close. "It's okay," she whispered. "It's over. We're safe. You're safe." The men didn't stay long. They had their own families to get back to, their own lives to tend. But before Henderson left, he clasped Cole's shoulder and said, "You need anything at all, you send word. You're not alone out here anymore." After they'd gone, Clara and Cole stood in the cabin, the events of the morning still reverberating through them. Hope had calmed down and was nursing, her tiny hands kneading Clara's breast. "Do you think he'll come back?" Clara asked. "Maybe. Eventually. But not soon. And not with the same certainty he had before." Cole sank into a chair. "You humiliated him out there, shot one of his men, faced him down, rejected him in front of witnesses. That's going to eat at him." "Good. Let it eat at him." Cole smiled faintly. "You've changed, you know, from that scared girl I met in Red Hollow Ridge." "Had to. Couldn't stay scared forever." "No, I suppose you couldn't." The days after the confrontation were strange. Clara kept expecting some kind of retaliation, some consequence for what she'd done. But nothing came. Henderson sent word a few days later that Harold had left the territory, gone to stay with a cousin 200 miles away. The injured man would recover. The story had spread through Red Hollow Ridge and the surrounding ranches, how Harold Hayes had tried to take his grandchild by force and been turned away. How Clara had stood her ground and shot a man to protect her daughter. The town's opinion was mixed. Some thought Clara was a dangerous woman, violent and unhinged. Others thought she'd done what any mother would do. But the important thing was that nobody else came to the cabin looking for trouble. Spring arrived slowly, melting the snow and revealing the brown earth beneath. Clara spent more time outside, letting Hope feel the sun on her face. The baby was 4 months old now, growing fast, her eyes tracking movement, her mouth forming sounds that would eventually become words. One warm afternoon, Clara was in the garden plot Cole had prepared, planning what to plant, when Esther arrived with a surprise visitor. Clara recognized the woman immediately, Sarah Mackenzie, who owned the general store in Red Hollow Ridge. Sarah had never been openly hostile, but she'd never been friendly either. Just neutral, which in the context of Clara's situation had felt like a judgment all its own. "Mrs. Mackenzie," Clara said, standing and brushing dirt from her hands. "Miss Hayes, or is it Mrs. Braddock now?" Sarah's tone was casual, but the question carried weight. "It's still Hayes. Cole and I aren't married. But you're living as man and wife." Clara's defenses rose. "We're living as two people helping each other survive. What we are or aren't is our business." "Easy now," Esther said. "Sarah's not here to judge. Are you, Sarah?" The store owner shifted her basket from one arm to the other. "No, actually, I came to apologize." Clara blinked. "What?" "I came to apologize. For how the town treated you. For how I treated you." Sarah's face colored slightly. I let your father's version of events shape my opinion of you. I let gossip and judgment cloud my thinking, and I was wrong. I don't understand. After what happened last week, the way you stood up to him, the way people rallied around you, it made me think. Made a lot of people think. Sarah set her basket down. You're not the first woman to trust the wrong man and pay a terrible price for it, and you shouldn't be punished forever for being human. Clara's throat tightened. Why are you telling me this? Because I wanted you to know that you have allies in town. Not everyone, but enough. And because I brought these. She gestured to the basket. Baby clothes, some toys, a few other things you might need. Nothing fancy, just practical items. Clara looked at the basket, then at Sarah, then at Esther, who was smiling knowingly. I don't know what to say. Say you'll come to town sometime. Let people see you're not a monster or a tragedy, just a woman raising her daughter. Sarah extended her hand. I'd like to get to know the real Clara Hayes, not the version your father created. Clara shook her hand, feeling something crack open in her chest. I'd like that too. After Sarah left, promising to visit again soon, Clara sat on the porch with Esther and cried. Not sad tears, releasing tears. Tears that washed away months of carrying shame that wasn't hers to carry. People can surprise you, Esther said gently. Sometimes in bad ways, but sometimes in good ones too. I thought I'd always be the town pariah. You might still be to some, but to others, you're just a woman who fought for her child and won. That's something worth respecting. That evening, Clara told Cole about Sarah's visit. He listened quietly, then said, You going to go to town? Eventually. Maybe. I don't know. Clara watched him carefully. Would you come with me? If you wanted me to. I do want you to. I want... She paused, gathering courage. I want people to see us together, as a family, if that's what we are. Cole set down the piece of wood he'd been sanding. What do you think we are, Clara? I think we're two people who found each other when we both needed finding. I think we're raising hope together, building a life together. I think... She took a breath. I think I love you, and I don't know if that's too soon or too complicated, given everything, but it's true. The silence stretched. Clara's heart hammered. Then Cole crossed to her and cupped her face in his hands. It's not too soon, and it's not too complicated. His thumb brushed her cheek. I love you too. Have for a while now. Just didn't know if you'd want to hear it. I want to hear it every day. He kissed her then, deep and sure, and Clara felt the last pieces of her broken heart slot back into place. Not perfectly. There were still cracks, still scars, but whole enough to work with, whole enough to build on. They married a month later in a quiet ceremony at Henderson's ranch. Esther officiated, Henderson and his sons stood witness, and Sarah Mackenzie brought a cake she'd baked herself. Clara wore a simple blue dress that Esther had helped her make, and Cole wore his best shirt with his hair slicked back. Hope, dressed in a gown Sarah had contributed, slept through the entire ceremony. It wasn't the wedding Clara had dreamed of as a girl. No church, no crowd of well-wishers, no father to walk her down an aisle. But it was real. It was hers, and that made it perfect. As spring turned to summer, life settled into new patterns. Clara went to town occasionally, always with Cole and Hope. Some people still crossed the street to avoid her, but others nodded politely, and a few even stopped to admire the baby. Sarah Mackenzie made a point of greeting them warmly whenever they came to the store. The garden Cole had prepared flourished under Clara's care. She planted vegetables and herbs, tending them with the same fierce protectiveness she gave to Hope. Watching things grow from seeds to full plants felt like a metaphor for her own life. From something small and buried to something vital and alive. One July afternoon, as Clara was weeding the garden with Hope playing nearby on a blanket, she heard a horse approaching. Her body tensed automatically, old fears rising. But when she looked up, she saw it was just the mail rider, a young man named Peter, who made the rounds once a week. "Afternoon, Mrs. Braddock," he called, dismounting. Clara still wasn't used to being called that, but she was learning to accept it. "Afternoon, Peter. Something for us?" "Letter. From back east, looks like." He handed her an envelope, tipped his hat, and wrote on. Clara turned the envelope over in her hands. The handwriting was unfamiliar, elegant, and careful. She opened it with dirt-stained fingers and began to read. The letter was from a lawyer in Philadelphia. It took her 3 tries to get through it. to understand what it was saying. Her mother had had a sister, an aunt Clara had never met, never even known existed. The aunt had died recently and left her estate to her only living relative, Clara. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough. Enough to buy proper livestock, enough to expand the cabin, enough to secure their future in a way that didn't require scraping by season to season. Clara sat down hard on the ground, the letter trembling in her hands. Hope crawled over to her, babbling something unintelligible but cheerful. Clara picked up her daughter and held her close. "We're going to be okay," she whispered. "More than okay. We're going to be safe." When Cole came in from mending fences, Clara showed him the letter. He read it twice, then looked at her with wonder in his eyes. "This changes everything," he said. "Does it? I mean, yes, the money helps, but we were managing before. We were surviving. This lets us actually build something lasting." He pulled her close. "You know what this means? It means Hope can have a real education, can have opportunities, can have a future that isn't limited by what happened before she was born." Clara leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his chest against her cheek. "She always had a future, because she has us." "Yeah, but now she has options too." They decided to use part of the money to hire help for the ranch, a young couple who'd fallen on hard times and needed work. James Henderson helped them build an addition to the cabin, creating separate rooms and making the space feel less cramped. Clara bought books, real books, and spent evenings reading to Hope even though the baby was too young to understand. But the best use of the money, in Clara's opinion, was simple: security. Knowing they had reserves, that one bad season wouldn't destroy them, that Hope would always have a roof over her head and food in her belly, that was worth more than any luxury. Summer faded into autumn. Hope took her first steps in October, tumbling into Clara's arms with a delighted squeal. Cole carved her a toy horse that she carried everywhere, even to bed. The hired couple, Emma and Robert, became friends as well as employees. The cabin that had once felt empty and isolating now rang with voices and laughter. One evening in late November, nearly a year after Harold's last visit, Clara stood on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Cole came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How different everything is from a year ago. How I was terrified and alone and certain I'd never be happy again. And now?" Clara turned in his arms to face him. "Now I have you. I have hope. I have a home and friends and a future. I have everything I never thought I'd get to have. You earned it, every bit of it. We earned it together." From inside the cabin came Hope's cry, not distressed, just demanding attention. Clara smiled. "That's my cue." "Our cue," Cole corrected. They went inside together, where Hope was standing in her crib, arms outstretched. Cole picked her up and spun her around, making her giggle. Clara watched them, her heart so full it almost hurt. This was her life now. Not perfect. There were still hard days, still moments when old fears surfaced. The town would never fully accept her, and there were people who would always see her as that fallen woman who got lucky. But she had built something real from the ruins of her old life, had taken the shame they tried to force on her and transformed it into strength. Later that night, after Hope was asleep and the fire had burned down to embers, Clara and Cole lay together in their bed. His arm was around her shoulders, her head resting on his chest. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Taking me in? All the trouble it brought?" "Never. Not once." He kissed the top of her head. "You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Clara Braddock. You and Hope both. Even though I came with nothing, even though I brought shame and gossip, and you brought life to this place, brought purpose. Before you, I was just existing, marking time until I died. Now I'm actually living." Clara tilted her head up to kiss him. "I love you. I love you too, both of you, my whole world." Outside, the wind howled and winter crept closer, but inside the cabin, warmth and love kept the cold at bay. Clara closed her eyes and let herself sink into sleep, safe in the knowledge that tomorrow would come, and she would face it with the people she loved beside her. The shame her father tried to brand her with had burned away, leaving only the truth beneath. She was strong. She was worthy. She was loved. And she was finally, truly, home. 2 years passed before Harold Hayes returned. 2 years of Clara building a life she'd never imagined possible. Watching Hope grow from a baby into a walking, talking little girl with Cole's steady temperament and Clara's stubborn streak. 2 years of the ranch expanding, of friendships deepening, of scars fading from angry red to pale silver. Clara had almost convinced herself that her father was gone for good, that he'd decided his pride wasn't worth another confrontation. Almost. She was in the garden on a May morning, Hope playing nearby with her wooden horse, when she saw the lone rider coming up the road. Her body recognized him before her mind did. That particular slump of shoulders, the way he sat his horse like he was doing it a favor by staying in the saddle. Her hands froze on the tomato plant she'd been staking. "Hope, baby, go inside and find your papa," she said, keeping her voice level. "But Mama, I'm playing—" "Now, sweetheart, go on." Something in Clara's tone made Hope obey without further argument. The little girl grabbed her toy and ran toward the barn where Cole was working. Clara stood slowly, wiping dirt from her hands, and waited. Harold looked older. The 2 years had carved deeper lines into his face, turned his hair completely gray. He dismounted with a grunt that spoke of aching joints and road-hard miles. When he looked at Clara, his eyes held something she'd never seen there before: uncertainty. "Clara." His voice was rough, like he hadn't used it much lately. "Papa." The word felt strange in her mouth after all this time. They stood there 20 feet apart, measuring each other. Clara heard Cole's footsteps behind her and felt his presence at her back. She didn't turn around, didn't need to. She knew he was there, and that was enough. "You look well," Harold said finally. "I am well." "The child?" "Her name is Hope, and she's fine, healthy, happy." Harold's jaw worked. "I heard you got married. To him." "To Cole, yes, 2 years ago." "Heard other things too, that you came into money, that you're doing well out here." Clara's guard went up. If he was here looking for financial help, he'd be disappointed. "What do you want, Papa?" He shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable. "Your brother's dead." The words hit Clara like a physical blow. She hadn't seen her brother Thomas in 3 years. He'd been working ranches in Wyoming when everything fell apart. "What happened?" "Fever. Took him quick." Harold's voice cracked slightly. "Buried him next to your mother." Clara felt grief rise up, sharp and unexpected. Thomas had been 6 years older, protective when he was around, absent when he wasn't. They'd never been close, but he'd been family. The only sibling she'd had. "I'm sorry," she said, and meant it. "Your cousin Mary's husband ran off, left her with 4 children and no way to feed them." Harold seemed to be reciting facts, like if he stuck to information, he wouldn't have to deal with emotion. "The house needs work I can't afford to do anymore. My hip's bad. Doctor says it's only going to get worse." Clara waited. There had to be more. Harold's shoulders sagged further. "I'm alone, Clara. Your mother's gone. Thomas is gone. He gestured vaguely at the cabin, the garden, the life she'd built. "You're here, and I'm alone in that big house with nothing but ghosts and regrets." "And you want what? Sympathy?" "I want—" He stopped, seemed to struggle with the words. "I want to see my grandchild, just once, before I die." Clara's laugh was sharp and bitter. "You wanted to take her from me. You rode here with armed men to steal my daughter, and now you want to see her?" "I was wrong." The admission hung in the air like something fragile. Clara stared at her father, searching for deception, for manipulation, but all she saw was a tired old man who'd burned every bridge and was finally realizing he was stranded on the wrong side of the river. "Wrong about what exactly?" she pressed. "About all of it." Harold's hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. "About throwing you out. About the things I said. About trying to take the child. I was angry and ashamed, and I took it out on you when I should have—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "When I should have protected you." Cole's hand settled on Clara's shoulder, a steady anchor. She reached up and covered it with her own. "You destroyed me, Papa. You called me a whore in front of the whole town. You sold me like I was livestock. You tried to take the only good thing in my life and put her in an orphanage." Clara's voice shook, but she pushed through. "You don't get to just say you were wrong and have everything be okay." "I know that. I do." Harold looked down at his boots. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking to be part of your life. I'm just asking to see her, to know she's real and she's healthy and she's loved. That's all." Clara turned to look at Cole. His face was impassive, but she could read the tension in his jaw. This was her decision, his expression said. Whatever she chose, he'd support it. She thought about all the pain her father had caused, all the shame he'd tried to make her carry, about the night he'd ridden out here with violence in his eyes, about every cruel word and colder silence. But she also thought about Hope, who would grow up asking questions about her grandfather, about family histories and blood connections, about the fact that holding on to anger was like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. "You can see her," Clara said finally, "for 10 minutes. On the porch. Cole stays with us the whole time. And if you say one thing, one single thing, that hurts her or makes her feel bad, you leave and you don't come back. Ever. Understand?" Harold's eyes went wet. "I understand. Thank you, Clara. Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." She went to get Hope from inside where Cole had stashed her with Emma. The little girl was playing with a rag doll Emma had made, singing a nonsense song to herself. When she saw Clara, she smiled bright and wide. "Is the bad man gone, Mama?" Clara's heart cracked. Hope had heard stories, carefully edited versions of why they didn't visit Grandpa Hayes, why Mama sometimes had nightmares. She was too young to understand fully, but she knew enough to be wary. "There's someone here who wants to meet you, sweet girl. Your grandpa, my papa." Clara knelt down to Hope's level. "He's not going to hurt you. Papa Cole and I will be right there. But you don't have to talk to him if you don't want to, okay?" Hope considered this with the seriousness of a 2-year-old making a major decision. "Will he be nice?" "I think he'll try to be, but if he's not, we'll send him away." "Okay, Mama." Clara carried Hope out to the porch where Harold waited. Cole was already there, leaning against the railing with his arms crossed. His posture was casual, but Clara knew he could move fast if he needed to. Harold stared at Hope like she was something miraculous. His granddaughter had Clara's dark hair, but it curled where Clara's was straight. Her eyes were hazel, caught somewhere between Clara's brown and some genetic contribution from the father who'd abandoned them both. She was small for her age, but sturdy, with scraped knees from climbing and dirt under her fingernails from helping in the garden. "This is Hope," Clara said. "Hope, this is my father, your grandfather." Hope studied Harold with the frank assessment of a child. "You're old." Despite everything, Clara almost smiled. Cole made a sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. "I am old," Harold agreed. His voice was gentle, softer than Clara had ever heard it. "You're very pretty. You look like your mama." "Mama's pretty," Hope said matter-of-factly. "Papa says so all the time." "He's right." Harold's hands twitched like he wanted to reach out, but knew better. "What's that you're holding?" Hope held up her wooden horse. "Papa Cole made it for me. His name is Thunder, and he's the fastest horse in the whole world." "That's a fine horse." "Papa Cole makes lots of things. He's building me a swing, and he teaches me to ride midnight sometimes, but only when Mama says it's okay, because Mama worries." Harold's eyes moved to Clara. "You have a good family here." "I do," Clara said firmly. "The best." They stood in awkward silence for a moment. Then Hope said, "Why did you make Mama cry?" The question was innocent, direct, devastating. Harold flinched like he'd been struck. "Hope," Clara started, but Harold held up a hand. "No, she deserves an answer." He lowered himself carefully to sit on the porch steps, getting closer to Hope's eye level. "I made your mama cry because I was mean to her. I said bad things and did bad things, and I hurt her very much. And I'm sorry for that." "Did you say you're sorry to Mama?" "I'm trying to." Hope looked at Clara. "Mama, did he say sorry good enough?" Clara's throat was so tight she could barely speak. "I don't know yet, baby. Sometimes sorry isn't enough. Sometimes people hurt you so much that sorry doesn't fix it." "But Mama, you always tell me sorry is important." "It is important, but it's not magic. It doesn't make the hurt go away. It's just the start of making things better." Clara looked at her father. "And sometimes people say sorry, but they don't really mean it. Or they mean it, but they don't change. Words are easy. Changing is hard." Harold nodded slowly. "Your mama's right. I said I'm sorry, but I haven't shown it yet. Haven't proved that I mean it." "How do you prove it?" Hope asked. "I don't know if I can, little one. Some things you break so badly they can't be fixed. Maybe the best I can do is stay away and let your mama be happy without me messing it up again." Clara felt something shift inside her. This wasn't the father she remembered, the harsh, judgmental man who valued reputation over love. This was someone broken and humbled, finally seeing the cost of his choices. But broken didn't mean trustworthy, and humbled didn't erase the past. "Your 10 minutes are almost up," she said quietly. Harold pushed himself to his feet with a grimace of pain. "Thank you for letting me see her. She's beautiful, Clara. You've done well." "We've done well," Clara corrected, pulling Hope closer. "Cole and I together. This isn't my success. It's ours." "I can see that." Harold looked at Cole. "You take care of them." "Every day of my life," Cole said. It wasn't a promise. It was a statement of fact. Harold mounted his horse slowly, every movement pained. He looked down at Clara one last time. "I know I don't have the right to ask, but if you ever find it in you to write, just to let me know you're all right, I'd appreciate it. No pressure, no expectations, just if you want to." Clara didn't answer, just watched him turn his horse and start the long ride back to Red Hollow Ridge. They stood on the porch until he was out of sight, Clara, Cole, and Hope between them. "Are you okay, Mama?" Hope asked, tugging on Clara's skirt. "I don't know, sweet girl. Ask me later." That night, after Hope was asleep, Clara and Cole sat on the porch watching the stars emerge. The night was warm, full of the sounds of early summer, crickets chirping, the distant hoot of an owl, the soft rustle of wind through the grass. "You gonna write to him?" Cole asked. Clara had been thinking about that all evening. "Maybe. Eventually. Not because I forgive him or because I want him in our lives. But because—" she struggled for the words. "Because I don't want to be the kind of person who holds on to hate forever. I don't want Hope to learn that from me. There's a difference between holding on to hate and protecting yourself from people who hurt you. I know. But there's also a difference between protecting yourself and punishing someone forever for their mistakes." Clara leaned her head on Cole's shoulder. "He's dying, Cole. Maybe not today or tomorrow, but soon. I saw it in him, and I don't want to carry the weight of knowing I could have shown a little mercy and chose not to. Mercy for him or for you?" "Both, maybe. I don't know." She sighed. "Is it weak to want to let go of the anger? No. It's brave. Holding on to anger is easy. Letting it go is hard as hell." They sat in silence for a while. Then Clara said, "I spent so long being defined by what he thought of me, by the shame he put on me. And I don't want that anymore. I want to be defined by what I choose, by how I love my daughter, by the life we've built, by the person I decide to be." "You already are those things." "I know. But sometimes I forget. Sometimes I still hear his voice in my head telling me I'm worthless, telling me I'm a mistake." Cole turned to face her fully. "You want to know what I see when I look at you?" "What?" "I see a woman who was thrown away and built herself back up from nothing. I see a mother who'd fight an army to protect her child. I see someone who's kind even when kindness wasn't shown to her. Someone who makes this house feel like a home instead of just a building." He cupped her face gently. "I see the strongest person I've ever known. And I thank whatever forces exist in this world that you ended up here, with me." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "I love you so much it scares me sometimes." "Good scared or bad scared?" "Good scared. The kind that means it matters. That losing it would break me." "You're not going to lose it. You're stuck with me, Clara Braddock, for the rest of our lives." She kissed him then, pouring everything she couldn't say into the connection between them. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, she said, "I might write to him. One letter, letting him know Hope is doing well, that we're doing well, but I'm not inviting him back into our lives. That door's closed. Your choice. I'll support whatever you decide." A month later, Clara sat at the kitchen table with paper and pen, trying to figure out what to say to a man who'd destroyed her and then had the gall to ask for a glimpse of what she'd rebuilt. She started and stopped a dozen times. Finally, she kept it simple. "Papa," she wrote, "Hope is well. She's smart and kind and loved. I'm well too. Married to a good man who treats me with respect. We have a home and a life and a future. I'm writing because you asked, not because I've forgiven what you did. I don't know if I'll ever forgive it. but I'm trying to let go of the anger because carrying it around is making me tired. I hope you find some peace in whatever time you have left. Clara. She didn't sign it with love, couldn't bring herself to do that, but sending it at all felt like a kind of victory over the bitterness, over the part of her that wanted him to suffer the way she'd suffered. Harold's response came 6 weeks later. It was short. Thank you for writing. I don't deserve your mercy, but I'm grateful for it anyway. You've become a better person than I ever was. I'm proud of you, even though I have no right to be. Your father. Clara read it once, then tucked it away in the trunk where she kept important papers. She didn't respond. Didn't need to. That one exchange had been enough to close something that had been hanging open inside her. The seasons turned. Summer gave way to fall, fall to winter, winter to spring again. Hope grew taller, started helping more around the ranch, began learning her letters from the primers Clara ordered from back east. The hired couple, Emma and Robert, had a baby of their own, a boy they named after Cole, which made him turn red with pleasure and embarrassment. Tom Henderson's older son James started courting Sarah Mackenzie, and their wedding became the social event of the season. Clara and Cole attended, and for the first time, Clara walked into a room full of Red Hollow Ridge residents without feeling like she had to brace for attack. Some people still looked at her sideways, but others greeted her warmly, asked about Hope, treated her like a person instead of a scandal. It wasn't universal acceptance, but it was enough. Word came in Clara's third spring as Cole's wife that Harold had died. Pneumonia, the letter from a cousin said. He'd been sick for weeks but refused to see a doctor until it was too late. The funeral was small. Thomas's widow had come, along with a handful of old acquaintances. Clara wasn't invited, but she hadn't expected to be. She felt relief more than grief. Relief that the threat of him was finally, truly gone. Relief that she'd never have to wonder if he'd show up again, making demands or causing trouble. But underneath the relief was a thread of sadness for what could have been, for the father he might have been if he'd been a different man, for the relationship she'd never had and never would. "You all right?" Cole asked, finding her sitting on the porch alone after she'd gotten the news. "Yeah, I think so." Clara looked out at the land they'd built together. The expanded cabin, the thriving garden, the barn where Midnight and 3 other horses were stabled. "It's strange. I thought I'd feel more when he died, but mostly I just feel tired. Tired of carrying him around in my head." "Then put him down." "How?" "Choose to. Every day, choose to think about what you have instead of what he took from you. Choose to remember you survived him. Choose to be free." Clara turned that over in her mind. Choose to be free. It sounded simple, but she knew it wasn't. Freedom from the past was something you had to claim over and over, every time the old shame tried to creep back in. But she could do that. She had been doing it, little by little, every day since she'd stepped onto Cole's land 3 years ago. "I'm going to plant a tree," she said suddenly. "A tree? For Thomas. For my mother. For the family I lost." She stood, energized by the decision. "Not for my father. He doesn't get a tree. But the others do. Something that'll grow and be beautiful and last longer than the pain." Cole smiled. "What kind of tree?" "An apple tree. So Hope can climb it and eat from it and remember that good things can grow even in hard ground." They planted it together that afternoon, Clara, Cole, and Hope. It was a sapling, barely more than a stick with roots, but Clara could see its potential. In 10 years it would provide shade. In 20, fruit. In 50, it would still be standing, long after she and Cole were gone. That night, Clara wrote in the journal she'd started keeping. She'd never been much for writing, but something about putting words on paper helped her process things. She wrote about her father's death, about the relief and the sadness, about the tree they'd planted and what it meant. And then she wrote about something she'd been thinking about for months. "I spent so long believing I was the sum of my worst moment," she wrote. "That mistake with Hope's father defined everything about me, made me worthless, unlovable, broken beyond repair. But that's not true. I'm the sum of every choice I've made since then. The choice to keep Hope when giving her up would have been easier. The choice to accept Cole's help instead of giving up. The choice to fight for my daughter when my father tried to take her. The choice to build this life instead of letting shame destroy me. Those choices are who I am. Not the mistake. The choices." She paused, pen hovering over the page. Then she wrote one more line. "I'm not perfect. I'm not even close. but I'm enough. And that's something my father never could have taught me because he never believed it himself. 5 years after Hope's birth, Clara stood in the garden on a morning much like the one when Harold had returned. But this time, there were no threatening riders on the horizon. Just her daughter, now a confident 7-year-old, helping to weed the tomatoes. Just Emma's son playing nearby. Just the peaceful rhythm of a life well lived. Hope looked up from her work, dirt smudged on her cheek. "Mama, is it true what Emma said? That you used to live in town and people were mean to you?" Clara's hand stilled on the plant she'd been tending. She'd known this conversation was coming, had prepared for it, but preparation didn't make it easier. "Yes, baby, that's true." "Why were they mean?" "Because I made a choice they didn't approve of. And because people sometimes treat others badly when they're scared or angry or judging things they don't understand." "Were you scared?" "Terrified. For a long time I was so scared I could barely breathe." Hope considered this. "But you're not scared anymore." "Not like I was then. I still get scared sometimes. Everyone does. But I learned that being scared doesn't mean you can't be brave. It just means you have to choose courage even when it's hard." "Is that why you fought those men who came here? The ones Papa Cole talks about sometimes?" Clara smiled. Cole had turned that confrontation into a story he told occasionally, always emphasizing Clara's courage. "Yes, I fought because you were worth fighting for. Because our family was worth fighting for. Because sometimes standing up for what matters is more important than being safe." Hope nodded seriously, processing this. Then she said, "I'm glad you fought, Mama. I'm glad I got to stay with you." Clara pulled her daughter close, not caring about the dirt they both wore. "Me too, sweet girl. Me too." That evening, the Hendersons came for dinner, a regular occurrence now. James and his wife Sarah brought their new baby, a girl they'd named Clara in honor of Clara Braddock's courage during her own hard times. The cabin was full of noise and laughter, children running underfoot, adults sharing stories and passing dishes. This was family, Clara thought. Not the family she'd been born into, but the one she'd chosen and been chosen by. The one built on respect and kindness instead of obligation and judgment. After everyone had left and Hope was asleep, Claire and Cole walked out to look at the apple tree they'd planted years ago. It was taller now, its branches spreading. "Next year," Cole said, "it might bear fruit." "Do you ever regret it?" Clara asked. "Taking me in? Everything that came after?" Cole pulled her close. "Every day." Clara's heart lurched before she saw the smile on his face. "Every day," he continued. "I regret that I didn't meet you sooner, that you had to suffer before finding your way here. That's the only regret I have." "You're getting sentimental in your old age." "I'm 32, Clara. That's not old." "Feels old when I'm chasing a 7-year-old around all day." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge. Clara thought about the girl she'd been, pregnant, terrified, standing in Red Hollow Ridge with her whole life falling apart. If she could go back and talk to that girl, what would she say? That it gets better. That the shame doesn't last forever. That the people who judge you don't matter as much as the people who love you. That strength comes from surviving, and you're stronger than you know. But mostly, she'd tell that girl what she'd learned in the years since. You get to write your own story. They can try to tell it for you, can try to make you the villain or the victim or the cautionary tale, but in the end, you're the only one who gets to decide what your life means. Clara had decided her life meant hope, meant courage, meant building something beautiful from broken pieces, meant showing her daughter that mistakes don't define you, how you respond to them does. "What are you thinking?" Cole asked. "That I'm happy. That despite everything, all the pain and fear and struggle, I ended up exactly where I was supposed to be. With me, with you, with hope, with this life we've made." She turned to face him. "You saved me, Cole Braddock, but not the way people think. You didn't save me by giving me a home or protecting me from my father. You saved me by seeing me as a person worth saving, by treating me like I mattered when everyone else acted like I didn't. That's what saved me." Cole's eyes were bright in the starlight. "You saved yourself, Clara. I just gave you a safe place to do it. Then we saved each other." "Yeah, I guess we did." They walked back to the cabin hand in hand, to the home they'd built and the daughter sleeping peacefully inside. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, crops to tend, animals to care for, A child to raise in a world that could be harsh and unforgiving, but they'd face it together, the way they'd faced everything else. Years later, when Hope was grown with children of her own, she'd ask her mother about those early days, about what it was like to be cast out and have to rebuild from nothing. And Clara would tell her the truth, that it was the hardest thing she'd ever done and the most worthwhile. Because some storms don't just destroy. Sometimes they clear away the old growth so new things can flourish. Sometimes they test you so thoroughly that when you emerge on the other side, you know exactly what you're made of. Clara had been tested by fire and had emerged as steel. Not perfect, never perfect, but strong, resilient, capable of weathering whatever came next. She'd started as Clara Hayes, the ruined girl, became Clara Braddock, the woman who refused to stay ruined. And in the end, she was simply Clara, mother, wife, survivor, fighter. A woman who'd been told she was worth nothing and proved everyone wrong by building a life worth everything. The shame they'd tried to brand her with had burned away, leaving only the truth. She was worthy of love, of respect, of a future bright with possibility. And that truth, once claimed, could never be taken away again. In the cabin, Hope stirred in her sleep and smiled. In the garden, the apple tree grew. And in Clara's heart, hope, real hope, the kind that sustains and transforms, took root so deep that nothing could ever pull it free. This was her life, her choice, her triumph, and it was more than enough.